You don't have to turn your head as much when we're spread out this way.
All right, good. All right, let's call the meeting to order. Let's stand and do the invocation and pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. I see him.
Rose Larkin, present.
Jennifer Rusk, present.
Greg Fossum, present.
Steve Johnson, present.
Robert Howell, present.
Wendy DiCatano, present.
Bill Veach, council liaison, present.
Chad Schutz, town staff present.
All right. We're gonna approve the agenda.
Yep. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Approve the agenda.
Yep. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Can I ask for one addition? If we can add on the front end, the Mahalan nomination?
We have a second?
I second that.
Well, he didn't make a motion, somebody's got to make the motion. Chad can't make a motion, he's not part of the committee.
I make a motion to add the Holland Award at the beginning of the agenda.
And I will second that.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Perfect. Is there a motion to approve the previous meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve those.
I'll second.
Any objections? Motion carries unanimously. Public comment on the agenda items. Also, I'd like to apologize for my delay. It's very rude to be late, and it's disrespectful of your time, and the advisory board's time, and I apologize. So we'd open it up for public comment.
Just please give your name.
My name is Dave Nussbaum. My speech is going to last longer than 3 minutes, so Joe Shiner will pick up the second half. I'm president of Island Winds Association. We were established in 1974. We're located at 6610 Estero Boulevard, which is R 201 on the beach marker. I've been president at Island Winds for the last 5 years. During that time, we've undertaken some massive projects to improve the property and improve our ecological footprint on the island. In 2015, we instituted a street-to-beach project in excess of $3 million. We have worked to eliminate all stormwater runoff from entering the beach. When we rebuilt the parking lot, we built massive underground reservoirs with membrane and pea gravel filters to take the first 3 inches of stormwater off the parking lot and filter it down. When those stormwater reservoirs are full, a checkoff valve carries the stormwater into the back bay. It is a cleaner stormwater than the first 3 inches. We have planted over 50 new mature trees on our property. We've eliminated all impervious surfaces on our property and put in pavers, replacing blacktop. We were the first complex on this end of the island to install Federal Wildlife Commission turtle-compliant lighting. We received a MRF award from this very committee for that action. We initiated a 10-year project to install turtle-compliant glass throughout our complex. We elected to put in .30 tinted glass, exceeding the .45 state mandated glass. We are 47% done with our 10-year project. The goalposts have been moved. And the project effectively has been stopped. I bring these projects up only to point out that Island Winds is working very diligently to be stewards of the beach and stewards of our island. Over the last several decades, we have watched and wonder as our beach, our backyard has grown in depth to the depth it is today. It is our minds natural wonder. This beach is used by tens of thousands of people each year. Its spaciousness allows people to fly kites, have bocce tournaments, play touch football, and countless other things, and of course make sand castles. Our beach hosts the American Sand Sculpting every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Hi, I'm Joe Shiner. So I'll just continue where Dave left off. It hosts sand sculpting contest. It's a place where people have room to just have fun. That's why they come to the beach here in Fort Myers Beach. It's an unparalleled. It is also a place for unparalleled. I'll forget the word. Beauty of sunset. Sorry. The ponding, so disingenuously referred to by the coastal engineer, creates a freshwater bird bath for ospreys to wash their salt off of their feathers. We are regularly visited by Rosetta spoonbills as they migrate. Shorebirds of all shapes and colors, including least and gall-billed terns. There are snowy and Wilson plovers, also black skimmers, and they eat the brine shrimp out of our ponding, tiny crabs, and sometimes even tadpoles. It is nature at its finest. Should we take that resource away? Dumping tons of sand on the beach destroys the living ecosystem. They smother it. It takes years for the sterile beach to recover. Should we kill one ecosystem for another? In my recent conversations with the coastal engineer, after looking at the nearby, at the history of our beach, he exclaimed, "In my 25 years, I have never seen a phenomenon. It's unique. Our beach is accreting, not eroding. Surely its unique and breathtaking beauty deserves consideration when one proposes to establish the establishment of dunes on one of the last 3,000 feet clear beach sand. As I said earlier, we will work with MRTF or any other organization to improve and promote the natural wildlife of the beach. But we must find a balance. Re-engineering our backyard, our property, is not one we wish to pursue. I wanted to give you our insight on this issue."
Thank you, Joe.
I would also like to enter these pictures of the birds that were mentioned. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments? Mr. Rapetti? Yep.
Mine won't last 3 minutes. My name is George Rapetti. I live at 8402 Estero Boulevard. I bought in Islands End Condominium Association back in 1988. When I got there, we had a big tree on our property, and that was the high water line. Been the high water line for a while, I guess, at that point. Since then, we've picked up about 400 to 500 feet from that tree down to the high water line. We have always been good stewards of our beach. We always take care of our beach. We follow whatever rules and regulations are necessary. We've put in glass, not as an association, but the unit owners have put in glass compliant with the rules and regulations up until recently. The rest of it is not going to sound good, but as far as I'm concerned, from what I understand, this committee made recommendations to the town council about putting in the turtle glass rule. From what I could see of the town council when they voted on that, or when Dave actually presented them with a piece of that glass, that what I call London bombing glass, blackout glass, they were all shocked. No one had ever seen what that glass looked like. The 5 councilmen never, including the mayor, which tells me that this group and the gentleman sitting over there never showed them a piece of that glass. I don't know whether you guys have seen a piece of that glass, but if you've ever seen it, it's going to keep out as much sunlight as it lets out, fluorescent light, okay? So in the daytime, I looked at that glass. I don't have a piece big enough. You can't buy a piece big enough, okay? But I've looked at that glass, and you can't tell me that it's going to allow sunlight in and let my light out. When that glass is in, I'm going to need lights on in my living room in daytime. I didn't come to Fort Myers Beach in 1988 to have sunlight blocked coming into my unit. I think the word is, what I'm thinking about is irresponsible for whoever made the recommendation to the town council, which allowed them to make the rule and the ordinance, pass the ordinance that they did without letting them see that glass. I was president, not been, thank God. I was president of Islands End for 20 years, okay? I've seen the council make some really, the word is stupid coming to my mind, but I don't want to use that word, but whatever it was, make mistakes in passing. This is probably the worst I've seen them make, and from what I understand, it came from this committee and a member of the town staff. Don't do it again. Change that rule. Make it the way the state and every other state has come up with 45 is fine. That gives everybody protection, and it allows us to get some sunlight coming in. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Right. I have no control over that.
I don't know what happened, but it's not functional now, so.
Yep. Any more public speakers? Nope. Okay. We will close the public comment and move forward with our current items. As approved, we'll add the Mulholland Award to the first item. And how many nominations were there? Chad, just the one?
Just one that I'm aware of, yes, sir.
Okay. How would you like to proceed? Discussion, open discussion, or?
There was a nomination for, I'd like to let, Mr. Veach, I think he put in the nomination.
Well, yeah, you're, at this state, usually MRF will make recommendations based on the choices of the applications that were presented and take a vote to recommend one. There's only one, but still, you talk about the recommendation, and then have a motion and a second and vote. And you've all seen it, it's Cindy Johnson, who I think Steve's being shy because he knows her pretty well.
Yeah, well, I'll recuse myself from the discussion and the vote.
But, as I said in the application, you all know Cindy. She's active in the pop-up. She's been active with Turtle Time. She's on the permit. She studies topics deeply and relentlessly, and is a strong advocate when she comes to something she believes in. So that's the reason I recommended her.
I thought it was a good recommendation, just because I see her very frequently at the pop-up tent for the Marine Resource Task Force. And she's always a good contributor.
I would second that. She has been incredible at not only being a good friend, a good mentor, but knowing and finding out the details and the facts of all of the town's subjects. So I would recommend and follow your recommendation for the Mulholland Award. I would like to make a motion to award Cindy Johnson with the Mulholland Award.
I second it.
I'm not sure if that came in the mic. You're pretty far back there.
I second it.
Any objections or discussion? Nope, okay. Vote passes unanimously, 5-0.
And keep in mind that when something goes over the next year, usually we try to get this done for Earth Day. So it's kind of, timeliness is pretty close. And it's meant to be like someone who's had the Murphy is for someone who's they're doing something. This is for someone who's been doing something for a while, not like a Lifetime Achievement Award. And the only thing that we've typically done is not award it to someone who's actually on MRF until, I guess, you retire.
I think we all deserve an award.
I think you get the leaf up there, and I think the first MRF committee they all got just from being on MRF. They were all up there. So.
There you go. Did they have to fill out a voting conflict form when they did that? I didn't vote, so should be no conflict. Good. So having completed that, let's move on to the irrigation regulations.
Yep, so if you recall back in 2020, around June, July, Phil Flood from the South Florida Water Management District came and talked to us, and you had recommended that you'd recommended to council to approve a year-round irrigation ordinance and a water shortage declaration ordinance. For whatever reason, we never went to reading over at council, so it's just revisiting that at the request of the district and putting that back out to y'all to make sure see if you're still behind that, if you have any issues. The only things that were changed from the statewide model ordinance were, I think, the schedule of fines should someone violate that ordinance. So it was just a heads up and a request for y'all to revisit that over the next month.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think that, I assumed that had moved forward. I thought that was actually more of a county mandate than it is a local
Yeah.
legislation.
So apparently we're the only locality in Lee County that hasn't adopted
on.
that particular one. So I'm gonna work with Christy. She was asking what the differences are from our current ordinance and the new one, and with your recommendation, proceed to council.
Mm-hmm. Good, so moving forward, you'll just get us then the language again, and then we can review it, and then come to our next meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, that was a quick one. It's the way we like them. Next is the FWC proposed herbicide spraying on Carlos Point Beach. So maybe I'll start. Actually, I had a follow-up and a to-do from the last meeting, which was to contact Rebecca Schneider at the FWC to ask the question that we forgot to ask her while she was here. And that was, one of the options at the time was potential using flame or a torch to manage the vegetation. And have you all received the email and a chance to read it? So I don't need to read it out loud, do I, Chad?
It's your purview, your meeting.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I want to go ahead and read it, and we'll set the stage here. So, so she says, hello, Steve, thanks for asking for the clarification. Use of fire to manage vegetation for beach nesting birds is a technique used at other beach nesting bird sites in the state, but has not always been effective for maintaining open sandy areas sufficient for least terns and black skimmers. Shorebird site managers have had only varying success at reducing vegetation with fire, and it's primarily for the royal tern and sandwich tern colonies that don't specialize on as much extensive bare ground as least tern require. A propane torch is expected to top kill target emergent plants, which will reduce growth and help prevent seedling. Parentheses, for some species, others may thrive on fire treatment, and parentheses, since a torch cannot target the underground root system or the seed bank in the soil, which has been planted via tilling, the treatment will need to be resumed several times throughout the growing season. It's not sustainable to enter the posted area to repeatedly implement this method. It will create excessive disturbance to our imperiled beach nesting birds. Burning also adds nutrients to the system so that farming feedback loop could continue, whereby conditions are very conducive to growth of sandspur and crow's feet when the summer rain starts, just as the birds are nesting and chicks beginning to hatch. Additionally, we cannot use a propane torch within a nesting area where eggs or chicks are on the ground. When exposed to heat, they will perish within a few minutes. Nesting coincides with vegetative emergence and growth. The fire method would not be an option at the phase in the growth cycle when the treatment is effective. The torch method could work to knock back sandspur now, but could not be safely employed later in the season. Therefore, spot treating with fire does not meet our important objective of minimizing vegetation in the nesting area when chicks are present, so as to reduce negative sandspur interactions that lead to infection and injury, which is the peak July and August. Fire treatment has Carlos Beach Fire treatment at Carlos Beach prior to the onset of nesting is not effective as there is insufficient fuel, sparse vegetation, for example, sparse vegetation, damp conditions, and it is not feasible as Lee County is currently under a burn ban issued by the U.S. Forest Service. Hope this helps. So I think that pretty well answers the question of why they can't use flame. Is there any discussion on that?
Pretty clear.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the remaining option then is broadcast. They're planning on moving forward with broadcast herbicides. Our recommendation to council was not to use glyphosate, certainly. And when she came back, she suggested imazapyr, which I sent you all the technical note on that. Are there any questions on that technical note? And my understanding is they attempted to use a self-regulating permit to be able to apply that, but I believe it was maybe a mechanical raking or some other permit. And the DEP told them they could not do that. And at that point, I don't know where it's at.
So, correct. So I wasn't aware that the broadcast spraying a herbicide was still on the table. Received that email of FDP rejecting that self-certification, saying it's invalid, it doesn't meet statute. So where it's at right now is the town has a area-wide permit for that area on behalf of the property owners to till the beach 4 times a year. That's 3 times following bird season, perhaps 4 times, with an initial event in the following 3 months, and then 1 time in March, which just passed. So they would, the FDEP, from what I'm understanding, would issue a NPR should the town consent to adding that to that permit. Alternatively, FWC could work directly with the property owners and get a permit to use herbicide with each property and broadcast spray herbicide in short order.
So they would need a DEP permit as well as the town permit, Chad? Or you're saying they don't necessarily need the town permit?
They don't necessarily need the town permit. They could work with each individual property owner, just as we are acting on behalf of the property owners as agents to remove dune vegetation. Seaward of the CCCL is a regulated activity, so they could act as an agent on behalf of Castle Beach, the single-family homes there, Carlos Point, Islands End, and obtain permission from FDEP to apply herbicide and do that.
So really, it's out of our hands. I mean, do I understand that properly?
You know,
We can, I mean, we're advisory board, we can make recommendations to council, but does council,
I think there's a timeliness factor here that the birds are arriving or have arrived.
sure, it was supposed to be applied by April 1st, I think, originally in their plan.
Yeah, and I was on a conference call with Allie McHugh, who's the regional director for FWC for the Southwest area, and yeah, they were just, she was told that they got a hard no from MRF and from staff on applying this herbicide. My recollection was that we weren't particularly happy about it, but there wasn't a lot of other solutions that really served the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And from what you read, in your research of the data sheet for it, the material data sheet for it, sounds like it's a lot more transient and inert than like glyphosate or some of those.
Is that Allie McQuinn from FWC?
That was McHugh.
ALI.
MCCUE.
Well, my concern was that if it's windy, then if it's applied to sand, it can go everywhere.
Or if it rains, it will then go into our waterways.
Well, I believe they sent us the recipe of how to apply it. And I think those two are listed, that there's restrictions on the wind and the expected rain. Obviously, either of those are variable and uncontrollable.
Yeah, you have to assume they're going to apply it in a prudent fashion.
Well, and I was still hoping they'd move forward with the higher salinity solution.
And,
I know it's not approved.
yeah, well, they actually say that it has higher toxicity to the birds, especially when you add vinegar and a surfactant, than this chemical does.
This has nothing to do with this, but did we address Mary's absence?
She's excused. She emailed Steve and I, and she was going to try and do a Zoom, but
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the grill in the room here is that there's, it's going to affect more than just the sand spur and the crow's feet, and I think that right now, as Rebecca had mentioned, it's the best Southwest Florida nesting area for these species. It's by far the best. So, as we discuss it, just keep that in mind. The problem is there's other species besides the birds. So, but again, as far as I can tell, there's a workaround for them. That what we say, or even, again, town council says, doesn't really have anything to do with their ability to get a DEP permit as a homeowner, correct? And I think that last year there was an issue with the vegetation removal that threatened the landowner's participation in the program. If that's correct, I don't, as you can recall, there's an issue with getting the vegetation removed early enough in the spring or in the summer, fall, whatever it is after the nesting season.
Yes, I thought the homeowners thought it was unsightly.
Doc, if you can talk into the mic, please, or
The homeowners, I thought that it was unsightly leaving that vegetation tall for that period of time.
Right. So town liaison, I mean, I unless there's something I'm missing, I'm not sure there's an action we can.
So I would like to correct the record. I know Councilman Veach had said that, they had said it was a hard no from me. My words to them is personally I wouldn't support it, but it's up to you and the town to say what you want on your beach and in your environmentally critical zone and what you don't want. I think it sets a bad precedent and tells residents who may want to use herbicide out on the beach that it's okay to use herbicide out in the environmental critical zone, which we already have an issue with in several areas. It is going to change the fundamental basis of the ecology out there. It's disrupts the photosynthetic chain or however you want to say. So that's going to fundamentally change things out there. Is that irreparable? I'm not sure. I'm sure nature is resilient enough to recover. I think it's a Band-Aid to a bigger problem with what's going on with these birds. Having said that, to deny it and have pictures of chicks with sand spurs all over them is not something I want to be responsible for. I am frustrated on a staff level that we've tried several seasons to try and test things and prepare for things, and talking with FWC to try different things, but that just hasn't come to fruition. I read through Rebecca's email, and I think there are some valid points with not being able to do this once the birds start nesting. I understand that. I do think you could make significant impacts into the sand spur growth going through and knocking back whatever emergent growth you have right now before the birds arrive or in the last 2 weeks, and that's been the idea for the last couple of years, but it just hasn't come to fruition. I did offer myself to FWC, every time I go over the beach and come over the bridge to the beach and go and spend an hour or so out there and just start knocking it back. And that offer still stands. If this committee felt like it wanted to still try the propane treatment, or even spot treatment with a herbicide, I would prefer that to broadcast spraying. But I mean, we could do our own, application or update modification, or no modification required to the town's permit to try to knock back propane, or knock back the sand spurs with the propane. Of course, that would need to get permission from FWC, especially in any of the areas that are already closed off. And it would also need some permission from the fire district. I don't know if the nutrient recycling, we know nobody's looking to burn the grass once it's grown and dry and trying to burn it off like that. That's not a suggestion. The suggestion right now is to try and keep it thinned out before it gets thick and before it can actually have much growth out there. So I still think it's a viable idea. I think it would, things just start to multiply and multiply. If you allow them to grow now, every seed head has a dozen, 2 dozen seed heads on it, and it just starts to go viral out there very quickly. So knocking it back on the early side of things will stop a lot of growth of the sand spurs. I know that the crow's feet gets pretty thick out there as well, but that's not the issue. And with regards to the chicks and the morbidity that they've been suffering, it's the sand spurs, and I think that is very. You could make a big dent in going and knocking those plants out one by one right now.
What about the option of manually removing it instead of burning it? Burning, it's going to take personnel to do that in manual removal.
Right. So, so herbicides used because it's the most cost-effective and takes the least amount of time to knock out all the vegetation. So it's the preferable method. Can you manually go and remove all those right now? That's going to be slower than, but maybe there's some sort of quick weeder that you could do that. I don't know about hand pulling out sand spurs.
Well, we've certainly done that in the past.
Yeah, we've done it in the past, and it's always been on the tail end. I think right now, before things go to seed head, or getting the green seed heads before they dry out and start to disperse, would be the go. You could certainly try and pull out those roots. They are a little bit more difficult versus the fire, and that's my sentiment.
I saw this little tool online. I was looking into it a little bit, and it looks like one of those electric-less sweepers that you can get. And it essentially had like the soft side of the Velcro on a roller, and you just roll it over the sand spur, and it would just take off the spurs, and then it would put them into a little basket or bucket. And
Right. So the idea is to kill the plants before they go to seed. Once they've gone to seed, the birds are pretty much already there, and therefore you can't really disturb things. So trying to kill the plants right now before they even go to seed.
Which means also timeliness is an important factor here.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I just take exception that we're backed into the corner here. I mean, this was brought to us. They had given us some options. We had chosen less more eco-friendly options like the vinegar salt mixture, the salt water, which were all, why were those offered? Is if they knew they couldn't use them. That's our problem. And then then they came back and said, oh, by the way, we can't use those. Here's our latest best herbicide to use. And now the season's literally started. I think the application was supposed to be done according to their Carlos Point Management Plan by April 1st, and, you know, here we are the 13th already. So I feel backed into a corner here to say if you don't destroy all those sand spurs, and once that gets posted, you can't go back in there and remove them, correct? Certainly not with a torch, as she's suggesting.
Yeah, I think the burn ban, I think any pragmatic fire inspector would see it right now, to go and torch those plants is not gonna
Yeah, I'd agree, yeah.
pose any danger to setting a fire. There's just, it's 99% sand out there. So, again, I just reiterate, I think that it does have some validity. I'm frustrated that we got such a late notice that this was gonna be happening, and it was just an indirect via FDEP notification that their certification had gotten rejected.
So are you saying that our committee can advise the town council to stop?
So if, I'm advising, if you wanted me to add the propane torch and hand picking or whatever other methods to remove emergent sand spurs on the beach in addition to tilling, we would likely be able to get a, no modification required letter from FDEP to start doing that.
But is that necessarily gonna prevent the landowners and the FWC to get the DEP permit themselves and still use the herbicide?
No, but I think there's something to be said about, whether or not the town wants herbicide being broadcast sprayed out in their environmentally critical zone. Is that okay, or is it not okay? Or is this something that's gonna be a one-off? Is it something that's gonna be standard practice going into the future? What do the property owners think about it? Are they fully informed? The kids that you see running barefoot on the beach, digging in the sand. My kids used to eat sand,
Most still do, yeah.
So, what does everybody think about it? Just being transparent and knowing about it before it happens, there's a lot to be said about that. So,
Sure.
is it just the board members of the property owners that know about it? Do the single-family home owners even know about what's happening on their property? And even if you can't change it, there's something to be said about having a position on it.
Yeah, but all of those would need to have participated in the DEP permit, correct? You said the landowners, the single-family residences should understand what's happening, correct?
Right, so they all understand, they've all been notified that tilling happens on their property, and that's all that the permit covers right now.
It's tilling, so they can apply the herbicide without them actually knowing? Is that what you're saying?
No, like I said, that they would need to get the property owner's permission to apply for another permit, but whether or not hundreds of people know about that for the permission from a president or a board, are signs going to be put out notifying people that herbicide's been sprayed? Is that something that makes it a beach that people want to go to?
I would be in favor of having a hand-picking event and possibly using metal rakes, because if you ever look at sand spurs, they grow normally horizontally, and then they just keep putting down roots. So if you had a metal rake, you could get quite a bit in one.
Yeah, right now it's not, it's emergent growth. There are some I saw out on the rack line that do have seed heads already, but right now it's more like the one shot or just a few, 5 kind of grassy leaves that you can, once you have an eye for it, you can recognize that it's a sand spur, but it's not necessarily a spur, spurs showing yet.
And that's a good time to get them before they stab you, if you're hand-picking.
Yeah, anything we can do to stay away from the herbicides. That's just gonna be downhill bad for everything.
Maybe the town could organize a sand spur picking event, the
I know
south end.
I know the town has a committee that does just that kind of thing.
But again, what's the timeline here? Aren't we well past the timeline?
So yeah, the areas would be posted, only FWC you know, FWC doesn't want anybody else going in there. So there would need to be some sort of, maybe, you know, Tyson or Rebecca walking people through there to make sure it's clear. There's already a snowy plover that has a nest out there.
Is
So
this something FWC can take care of?
I don't,
Willing to?
well, FWC wants to use herbicide.
That's the only option they want to do?
Well, they have, I mean, you've seen the document.
Right.
They have, you know,
I mean, in the correspondence with you guys, have they, other than like, oh, what we could do, but there's no way we could appeal to them to try to go out there with a force and take care of it without chemicals?
I don't think they have the resources.
I think resources are an issue.
Yeah.
So again, my question is there time to do it? I mean, maybe it's just my unfamiliarity with exactly the timing and the separate, you know, the seeding time and the staking time and the chick time, and I mean, because during the season, they go into the nesting area, correct? And they actually.
Yeah,
they
if you know what you're looking for, you can steer clear of nesting birds and not spook them.
Not spray them.
Right.
And spook them.
So, but FWC, you know, if you're in those, if you are in those posted areas and you do, you know, a take is harass or, you know, disrupt their nesting behavior and they leave that nest, that's a take.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So when officially are people not allowed in that area? I mean, aren't they allowed?
So they're posted right now.
What date did that?
That was April 1st. Staff was out there helping them post as well.
So it sounds like this is more something we should just be prepared for next season then.
I mean, that's where I'm at.
So we should get some
Well-
ideas together for next season, because it seems like we can't go in, FWC can't do anything but herbicides. So, like.
Well, there's a lot of area that can be taken, that could be something more mechanical rather than chemical outside of those posted areas.
We could, based on their information from August, it said on this little chart that on the shorebird nesting season for April and May, whatever, that you can do surface raking as long as there's an FWC bird monitor there.
Right.
So I was looking for the dates of the birds because I know some birds come a little bit later than others, but.
So, Chad, would that be their intention, then early in the season to continue to till and then use herbicide? I mean, the timing is just still confusing the hell out
So
of
their
me.
intention was to have already broadcast sprayed herbicide. I didn't feel comfortable as staff authorizing that when you know, in your letter to them stated, you know, that you object to the use of artificial chemical herbicide treatments with, you know, glyphosate in parentheses, but at that time, there wasn't any other herbicides being suggested. So for me to go against what you had recommended, I didn't feel comfortable in saying, yes, go ahead and do, you know, go ahead and authorize it and start spraying, and then, you know, word gets back to town, and Chad, why did you say that? And when we told you we didn't like that.
So they need your authorization before they can,
They need the towns, I'm not the town.
I thought you said that they don't need the town's authorization, that it.
Again, they can go for, that's for on the town's permit. They could
I
go
see
through
what you're
their,
saying. So the option, if that wasn't accomplished, then they could go to the homeowners and get a DEP permit. Exclusive of what the
the
town.
property owners.
Yeah, the property owners, landowners.
Yeah, and in Marco Island, where it's state lands, they, you know, they don't have to ask anyone's permission. They just do vegetative management how they want to.
without DEP?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know what kind of permitting they require on state lands for wildlife management.
Well, when you say that they can do what they want,
My understanding is, you know, is that they don't notify the city because they don't need to. It's state lands,
So it sounds like the only thing we could recommend is a manual removal in coordination with FWC. So that, you know, volunteers coming in with FWC pointing out the nesting and where people can't go. I mean, that's the only option I see right now.
Yeah, they make it sound like you can use a tractor and pull a surface rake, but that.
Yeah, they can, I think,
isn't
so Mr. Perry can rake on behalf right now.
But that doesn't seem reasonable with nesting birds, though. I mean, people with a rake,
They rake weekly right now around those posted areas. They're raking right now.
but once the birds start nesting, that's not,
They rake throughout the nesting season, just not within the posted areas.
So this vegetation is really just within the posted areas then?
Well, that's the vegetation of concern yet. But those posted areas they're acres.
Mm-hmm.
But with a monitor, a bird monitor, people could go in and do raking or hand picking or whatever.
That would be up to FWC. I don't know if that's a yes or a no. What I've been told is only FWC personnel in those posted areas. I'm not sure if they would allow a certified bird monitor. They have a bird monitor who's like hired seasonal staff. So I guess they're, quote unquote FWC as well.
Could we request that? Like some available dates that they would be able to come down and we would coordinate an activity?
To Mr. Steve's point, everything, it should have happened yesterday.
but since we can't go back in time, let's move forward. And I make a motion that we coordinate with FWC to do a manual removal of sand spurs.
I would second that.
Discussion. So that would be a request to the FWC.
I mean, the FWC, again, I can talk to FDP and see if manual removal during nesting season requires a modification to our permit, which only allows tilling, and then talk to FWC to see what they're comfortable with. But again, you have a tractor going and raking next to the posted areas, so it shouldn't be an issue.
What would be the interval? So you would basically, I mean, what would this look like? You'd have a small team and they'd come down once a week?
Right, so again, they're able to rake outside of the posted areas
Which
right
should
now.
take care of all that.
Which, if it's done properly, and we've even talked about tilling, because there's not much difference between tilling and raking in terms of disturbance. And there is a caveat in our permit to allow tilling with FWC's permission during nesting season. And, I don't know if that's still on the table or not, or if FWC would allow that outside the posted areas. Right now, the issue is inside the posted areas, what to do, so, because nobody else can go in there except for FWC.
I would say I'm completely against using herbicides, but I want to know what their argument is to using them. Is it very low concentrated, enough just to get rid of this and not harm the birds? I want to know what their thinking is.
So it's quote unquote low risk, in terms of, its environmental impacts. It's the least of all evils.
I've spoken with a few horticulturists who say that, if used properly, and I understand your argument that we don't want to put out there to the community that herbicides are something that should be used, but if they have an argument that to save and protect these nesting shorebirds, to be able to do that and use a herbicide that is low concentrated, low risk to the environment, we as a committee should, weigh in everything. That's my thought process on that.
But they can't do that now until September, according to their calendar, when you can use chemical treatments.
So we do have a motion on the table, and I'm not rescinding it. And it's been seconded. And it has nothing to do with herbicides, I'm sorry.
We can revisit that.
Well, we're into the discussion phase, Doc, so
I
we're,
know.
we're discussing.
I understand.
Right on.
And you're right about the herbicides. I'm just looking at their little calendar that cannot be used now till September, when I guess most of the birds are gone.
That's their document. It's probably a living document. I'm sure they could make adjustments as needed. But birds are nesting more and more every day. And again, I was not comfortable with being the authority to say yes or no. You'll have said in the past that you object to it and therefore make,
We can certainly attempt to do it, but I just don't know if it's gonna push things back, whether they'll just go ahead and get the permit anyway. I suppose we can support the motion and at least make an attempt to have an alternative to herbicides. I mean,
control what you can control.
that's what I'm saying. I mean, it seems like things are stacked against us. So I hate to ask you to repeat your motion, but it was to contact the FWC to,
To coordinate an event at stands for removal with the FWC.
would we need a plan to submit?
We first have to find out if they will allow us in there.
Sure. Okay.
I seem to remember them having something organized back in this, where are we now?
That was at the end of the season. Yeah, we went out and we tried to get rid of as many seed heads as possible, just to prevent them from propagating next season, yeah.
Right.
I might have a few contacts in the birding world, like Brad Cornell and then that has helped with removal in the past, that I could reach out to see if he'd be willing to, I don't know if he is a FWC liaison or somebody willing to come down so we can, because they say you need somebody appointed by FWC. I know he cares a lot about it, and other people in that world might be willing to just volunteer their time to help.
Yeah, I don't hear too much from the birding people these days on the beach at all.
There's not a lot of,
So, okay, we
No,
need to
actually,
probably move on here.
FWC has asked for people to,
Be bird monitors, actually. You could actually,
They're in need of help.
yeah. Okay, well, any more discussion on it? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. So we will contact FWC, tell them we would be more than happy to, if they allow us, to help remove vegetation in the staked-off area, and that would be during the bird season, correct?
Whenever they allow us.
It would probably need to be as soon as possible, if it was gonna have a significant impact.
So this motion, does it have to go to the town council? And then they give you the okay to contact the FWC? I mean, do we have to follow those?
No, I mean, I'm happy to just have the discussion with FWC, this afternoon or whenever they answer the phone and see what's possible and what's not possible.
Perfect. Very good, thank you, Chad. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Next up, landscape and the tree ordinance.
Are we on sea turtle? Sea?
No, we're on C.
Yep.
Oh, I have a
See, landscape and tree ordinance.
mine says upcoming sea turtle nesting.
Wednesday, April 13th, 2002,
Yeah.
2022. Yeah, we have different agendas.
Landscape is F on mine.
Okay, I think that would, for the sake of maybe our guests who might be here to listen to our discussion on this, why don't we go ahead and
I don't care.
move forward with that. So next up is the upcoming sea turtle nesting season. Okay, that'll be a quick one then.
This was posted outside.
Okay, this is the one that Chad sent, so. Okay, so we are now on upcoming sea turtle nesting season.
Yep, so just to make the public aware that staff will inspect properties. If you want to give me a call or an email, I can go out to your property at night and let you know what if any, issues you may have.
think I recall the town manager or you saying that you were gonna send out a letter with the
Water bills. Yep.
water bills to the oceanfront properties.
It actually goes out to the entire town.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just beachfront properties that I recall.
Yeah, we had asked also whether or not there was a percentage you could provide us with what percentage of water bill recipients receive water bills versus direct payment.
Yeah, so we do send it out electronically as well.
Oh, you do, okay.
Social
On an
media.
advisory or, okay.
Yep.
FMB News, gotcha. So what's the approach to compliance this year on sea turtle season versus last year? Is there any changes?
So warning letters, so compliance would start with me going out weekly inspections to survey lighting on properties. If there's a light not in compliance, send a warning which serves as education to the property owner that the light's not in compliance and it needs to come into compliance. And after that, it is a citation. First citation is $250. Second citation is $500, and so on. It stays at $500 for every citation thereafter. If there is a irreparable, irreversible violation, state statute allows for a citation of up to $5,000.
Have you been in touch with Margaritaville and how those big floodlights they've been having on all night?
Sure, it's conditioned in their permit that that'll go off during sea turtle season.
Okay.
And so examples of irreparable, irreversible are disorientations both of adults and of hatchlings. So last year, there was a disorientation of an adult from the dune area, kind of mid-Gulf, I think it's Gulf Road.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about
And
that
it disoriented towards the 6,000 block. I'm not sure how many thousands of feet it was, but it was a fair way. And then we had several disorientations of hatchlings. It was even though the number of disorientations was low, we had a low number of nests just due to tropical storm over washes.
Right. So what was, for 2021, what was the actual total in fines? Outside of, let's say, just the $5,000, just, the big ones?
I'd have to get back to you.
Beach furniture, PWC compliance, has that changed? There was obviously discussion during this past year about the ability for water sports and beach furniture vendors to store furniture on the beach.
Right, so that's beach furniture is not allowed to be out on the beach at night, including cabanas.
There is a question about the dune line. Has that been addressed?
So it's defined, the seaward line of vegetation is defined in the code. So no, sir, that hasn't changed. That defines, so the beach is defined as from the water line to the seaward line of vegetation, meeting that definition. So if there's no seaward line of vegetation, then it can extend from, on property from the closest vegetation.
So specifically the Wyndham, let's say, they have a dune that's relatively close to the beach, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're suggesting that they can just continue to park the jet skis right behind whatever that line would be if it was parallel to the mean high water line.
Is there a question there?
Yeah, that's the question. Is that the correct understanding of the?
So I would stand at the water line. That property is probably one of the more complicated ones because you have a piece of vegetation that goes out and then it kind of cuts back diagonally. Where does that, wherever you're standing, if you're standing at the water line and you're going, are you going perpendicular? Or are you going at an angle towards the Wyndham?
From the Wyndham to Lanark. Is that the diagonal line?
No, so there's several properties in there, and some of those properties do have dune vegetation that it would go back to that, the nearest dune vegetation.
I'm sorry, not Lanark, Flamingo. I misspoke.
No, but,
There's no, I mean, there's not a piece of vegetation from that dune at Wyndham to Flamingo, correct?
there's vegetation in between there, at properties in between there, yes. So you would go back, I believe it's Gullwing probably has vegetation in front of it for sure. There may be some closer to there. And I know some of those single-family houses have vegetation in front of there.
Yeah, but I mean, those are much closer to the landward side.
Correct, so the line of vegetation
Oh, I
would go
see
back
what
to
you're
the
saying.
closest.
Yep.
So it would include, all of that area would be included as beach.
Okay, but the intention is obviously to enforce the ordinance that's in place for beach furniture and for water sports.
Yes.
Okay. That's perfect. One other quick question maybe is, so with the sea turtle ordinance also, I know there's, at the last town council meeting, a gentleman from Ocean Harbor, is it, next to Publix? Ocean Harbor came for, is looking for a lighting permit, but also technically Bay Oaks Recreation Center. That's, I don't know if they've submitted for a land development order for their lighting plan yet, but those, my understanding is if I read that ordinance, that those would be required to use long wave amber, according to, section, whatever it is, section 5, section 4 of the turtle of the sea turtle ordinance.
If the lights are visible from the beach.
I don't think that's accurate. It's under the new construction definition, correct?
Yes, sir, correct. So I'm just looking, I'm gonna read you the applicability of the sea turtle ordinance. So the provision of this article shall apply to all properties within the town that may produce light directly, indirectly, or cumulatively visible from any portion of the beach, regardless of whether those properties are beachfront properties, and to all buildings and related infrastructure, including landscaping, as well as other activities that may adversely impact sea turtles. So
that would, in fact, apply, correct? Cumulative light? That's,
if they're visible from the beach,
how do you find that out until after they install it?
they have photometrics, that should not be light trespass off that property.
And that's the sea turtle ordinance you're reading?
So that's the lighting ordinance, the lighting standards.
That's the municipal lighting ordinance?
The lighting standards, yes, sir.
So if you look at section, section 5 states, whenever the requirements or provision of this ordinance are in conflict with the requirements or provisions of any other lawfully adopted ordinance or statute, the most restrictive shall apply.
Mm-hmm. So if the photometrics say the light's not to trespass off the property, and the ordinance only applies to lights that are visible from the beach, theoretically, if it's not trespassing off the property and it's not
Theoretically.
beachfront.
Theoretically, he did throw out a theoretic.
I'm
Right.
sorry, I don't understand the question, Mr. Steve.
So the question is if there's cumulative light that is visible, then how would you stop that? You're suggesting that the light won't, there's no Raleigh scatter, you're suggesting there's no sky glow, correct?
So what I'm understanding is you as a committee would like to recommend to council that any and all lights that are in the town of Fort Myers Beach be long wavelength. Ocean Harbor is not beachside,
But the beachside has nothing to do with it, according to our ordinance, I believe.
right? So my question stands, am I understanding that landward properties of the CCCL should have long wavelength,
Indirect, direct, or cumulative is the question.
should have long wavelength bulbs?
Typically, parking lots have a very high concentration of lighting.
I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I would say follow the ordinance. I mean, it shouldn't be a request, I guess is my question.
I'm just looking for direction.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think maybe we need to sharpen up on it and make sure that everybody's under the correct understanding.
Ocean Harbor, by the way, I believe is installing long wavelength.
I think in the front, yeah, I don't know. That's why I asked, yeah. But I think from preliminary photometrics of Bay Oaks, they are not for parking. I know the field lights have an exception. Correct?
I'd have to look at the plans.
Right, okay. That was just a question. Any other questions on sea turtle season?
Do you want to address anything that they were talking about?
That's gonna come up, actually, I believe.
Indeed, sea turtle ordinance.
Yeah, that was sea turtle prep.
Oh, okay.
So I'll use so sea turtle conservation ordinance, so that would be the one we were just discussing, that ordinance. It was placed on here, and I think it specifically has to do with window tint. Am I correct?
Correct.
Pretty sure, yeah.
Okay, so for our guests who I think are probably staying here for one of many, maybe a couple of beach renourishment here as well. But as you're well aware, we're appointed by the town council to advise the town council. So that's our position here and what our objectives are. So, Chad, I didn't print it out, that email you had sent on the ordinance itself? And the sort of the,
What's the question, sorry? Do I have?
the question is that you didn't print out the, actually,
Sea turtle conference. Here, if you want it.
Right here.
I'll put it out here, but I think it's important to know, I mean, a couple things. I guess the first thing is we're here acting for the town council, and we're not representatives of any conservation organizations. We don't represent them here at this meeting. So, having said that, the attachment you had sent us, let me find it here, talks a little bit about where this started and maybe who put in the 15%, correct?
Yeah, so I was asked to just explain to town council why we're at 15% and the state is still at 45%. And that's, you're referring to my, I believe what they call the MNP report, which goes to council.
Right, right. And in that, you actually state that the FWC is the one who recommends 15%.
Correct.
That is correct, yeah. And the reason that is because 45% is no longer effective.
I would say it's never been effective.
Correct. I mean, that's debatable, I think, from earlier light technologies, but I think with bright white LED lights, it's been found to not stop the white LED. I think that's the problem, and I think that's why the FWC is recommending the 15%. Because the reason that's in there, I think from my, if I look at this, it's for the protection of the homeowner. The conservation organizations have nothing to do with compliance. They're there to conserve the animals. The town's responsibility is to enforce the Endangered Species Act, which includes one of many things. As we said, beach furniture, clearing the beaches, lighting, tilling, let's say raking, those types of activities that are occurring on the beach during sea turtle season. So, having said that, 45 at one time, I think, was chosen because it would protect the homeowner from getting a citation. So, for
I would just caveat it real quick, sorry to interrupt. So that
Yeah.
45% always had the caveat that may not, you still may not be in compliance and additional window treatments may be necessary. In other words, draw your curtains.
correct, right, that it's
So-
it's not a get out of jail free card to
Right.
say I have 45.
Right, so it wasn't that 45% used to be okay and now that it's not.
Right, well, it's been around for over 30 years, I think.
It's
and
been
that's-
around, but it's been caveated that you may need additional window treatments to be in compliance with local
Sure, and that's
ordinance.
in the ordinance as well. Yep, I think even in ours, it's 15. I mean, that's just not a get out of jail free card, although 15% would do it. And I think the problem that's been occurring on the beach is obviously light. I mean, we have so many photographs of lit up buildings from the beach at night. And some of the more difficult ones are, let's say, and I like to say it's not so much the homeowners as it is the property owners or the residents as it is the rentals. People come in, they want to enjoy themselves, they don't really want to take the time to understand local ordinances and things like that. And I do understand that. You just want to have fun as much as you can during the week. But the example I always give is that you go to the beach, you have a rental on the beach, you go to the beach, you have fun all day, you go back, you take your shower, you turn the lights on, drapes are open, and then you go downtown to have dinner. Yeah, maybe we'll listen to some music, we'll drink, it's night, and those lights are just pouring out of the windows. So the reason this is actually in the ordinance is to help prevent those situations and it's to protect the homeowner. So all their options are to draw the curtains, and they're not there to draw them. You can pay for automated drapes, possibly, but the point is that's why it's in there. So the choice certainly, no, let me finish this line of thought. The choice is certainly not to have it. And again, I think our position here is to advise town council. But with 45, you still need to draw the drapes. It's not a get out of jail free card. And I think that's one of the advices we have to give to the town. And I think that, and the reason I ask how many citations were written last year is I don't think there were many. I mean,
There weren't many last year.
but yet we were completely, I mean, by the photographs that you have, there's many out of compliance properties. So the question is without citations, then there's no repercussions. So if we're not going to fine people, then what reason do they have to want to comply with it?
Once you give a warning, how long do they have to fix it?
I want to say I typically allow maybe 5 days. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at my language. I haven't looked at those letters in a few months, so it may be 3 days from when they get the letter. Because the issue with snail mail is that so I do an inspection. The next day I'm pretty much shot because I've been up since not getting to bed till 2 o'clock. So if it's a Thursday, then you have the weekend, and then Monday, working, maybe a dozen, 2 dozen, getting those letters out may take a couple of days. Then you're to the postal system, so maybe it's already been a week or two by the time they get that mail. Last year, what I tried to do, having been here for a while, is just email people directly, go to the houses, try and fix the issues right away, and just get them into compliance. And that, I found that to be successful. It had much faster turnaround, especially for exterior lights. There were issues. But the interior lights with the constant rotation of visitors, just never seemed to get solved.
Can you clarify? Under interior lights must be shielded, it has curtains, tinting, and turn-off lights. Is it a or is it an and between those three?
I believe it's a combination thereof. Let me see.
So instead of, I mean, if they didn't have a 15% and they closed the curtains, would that satisfy that ordinance?
Right, so the 15% is only required on new construction and window replacements. You have a lot of windows that haven't been replaced, or, it's not a new building, therefore they're not required to have 15%. So in order to mitigate for that, there are these options.
It is a or.
Well, right, so you have number 4, which is a combination. You may be looking at an older, the 2020 version. And the 2021 version, if you look at parent 4, under that section, a combination of the above techniques may be required to achieve compliance with this article.
Okay. So it is not a requirement of 15%. It's a suggestion, or close the curtains, or turn the lights off.
Or it can be an and, it's a combination,
That's what I'm trying to clarify. Is it an and, or is it an or?
a combination. Whatever works. Whenever you're talking about best management practices, whether it's erosion control or,
So it's
in this
basically you're on the
case-
beach looking for lights, and if it looks too bright, that's they didn't do what is necessary.
correct.
Technically, if you can see the light,
Yeah.
a light.
So, but it is, if they have blackout curtains and you can't see the light,
They're good.
they're
Yeah,
good.
you don't have to have anything on your windows, correct. So,
And we have a lot of clear windows that have blackout curtains, and they're in compliance.
Okay.
correct, yeah. And so I think my point is this, is that, I mean, we'll make a motion to advise the council, but the position is this, is that you can't have it both ways, council. Either you're going to actually enforce your ordinance and write citations for people that are out of compliance with the Federal Endangered Species Act, which is, there's no wiggle room in that, or you're going to say, we would like you to put in 15% for new construction or replacement windows, and we won't write citations if you leave them open. I mean, because of the fact that it is very effective. So, I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. I mean, I don't really have a dog in this fight. I'm looking at it from the town council's perspective. That you can't have it both ways. Or you can do what maybe like Long Beach did and said, listen, here, you can have 15% and that's great. And I think ours is written that way, but if you have 45, you can, you're gonna need something else to stop the light from coming through the window. That it really technically doesn't do anything for you, with the exception of providing you thermal benefits in heating and cooling. But that's, I mean, like I said, if somebody doesn't have any type of tint and have blackout curtains, that's fine too, if they're always closed. But if they're open,
If it's a rental property, as a property owner.
Those are the
you
problems.
are taking that risk.
Well, that's also, you're not taking the expense of the 15%. So the benefit is you don't have to put 15% on. The risk is somebody doesn't close the curtains. So that's up to the owner to help compliance.
not under our current ordinance. Our current ordinance says that if you have new construction, or if you have new construction or you are replacing windows, then they need to be 15%.
Okay.
If you have an older, you have existing windows that have no tint, then you need to use blackout curtains, apply tint to the inside, or, what's the third one, Chad?
Turn the lights off.
Or turn a light off, yeah,
Yeah, rearrange lamps, move fixtures away from the windows.
yeah. And
What happens if there's disorientation? And it can be, you've had numerous letters sent out from the town and warnings and fines, and you have this rental and you haven't done anything, and there's a nest and a disorientation in front. What are what happens. Then with
So
that
even if you
case-
haven't had any warnings, you know, ideally, you know, from an enforcement standpoint, if somebody's had a disorientation and there's documentation showing that lights were on at a property and the hatchlings were oriented towards that property, that would be considered a irreparable, irreversible violation, punishable up to $5,000 fine.
Mm-hmm.
per disorientation, per
That's,
turtle, per.
no, that's for the town. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife can fine up to $25,000 per organism if they were found dead.
So this is serious.
It's a federal law. I mean, it is
But I
very serious.
understand their point too as homeowners, because I've had some windows in my house replaced in the last couple of years, and I probably wouldn't want 15%, and I'm not on the beach, so, but I personally wouldn't. I would go with the blackout curtains and maybe the 45%.
Again, though, if it's a rental and you can't always control, you're still, as a rental, as a property owner, responsible. So if you are renting it weekly, you have no control.
Well, maybe the town council could add in something to the ordinance about if you're a resident on the beach, that you could go with 45% if you were replacing your windows and use the blackout curtains or turn off your lights. But if it's just rental property, then window replacements or new construction would have to be 15%.
But remember, those doors can open. 15% is not 100% corrective. Because if they open the sliding glass door or the window, the light's still gonna get through. I mean, right now in my house, every door is open now, but I don't live on the beach.
So again, to frame this, it's about the town's ability to make the beach compliant to the FWC guidelines, which is based on the Endangered Species Act. So the federal government has established the Endangered Species Act. The FWC is the state organization then that has to enforce or manage the Endangered Species Act in the state of Florida, and then the town then becomes the responsible party to make sure that those FWC guidelines are compliant. And that's the framework. So this is all about how does the town comply with the FWC guidelines for the Endangered Species Act. So our responsibility is to advise town council on how to do that.
And I would just kind of make a point of something that Rose said. The town doesn't, I think, have the legal ability to say that if you're a rental, then you have one set of rules, and if you're an owner, you have the other, because that's changing the short-term rental ordinance, which could invalidate the entire thing. Also, I think that where you are on the beach, as long as you're visible from the beach, it doesn't matter if you're 500 feet away or you're 40 feet away. Even if you're across the street and there's no obstructions, you're visible, then the rule applies to you.
I mean, but shouldn't the person who opens the door or the curtain also be at risk for the fine? Because you can have 15% doors, you could have blackout curtains, you could have everything. They open the door and turn the lights on, you know, the light's still getting out. So I think you got to put the owner responsible for having the things available to be used, either themselves or the rental, and find the person who violates, you know.
I don't think that's something that we can do as a town.
Yeah,
That's property
unfortunately,
based,
that's not the way code enforcement works. Code enforcement, the property owner is ultimately responsible.
Now, many of them have it in their agreement, you know, their rental agreement, that if there's a violation, that they will charge you.
That's-
But we cannot do that. We can only move against property, not against individuals.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again about many of the properties, the rental properties have that in their leasing agreement?
There's something in there that I know I've seen a lot of examples of people with like very threatening forms saying that if there's a violation and we're fine, then we're going to charge you.
Yeah, so a few different things that I recommend to rental properties and resorts is get an automated, cell phone messaging, either a text message or a voice message that goes off around 8:30 and remind them that it's sea turtle season, curtains need to be drawn, etc. I think some of the resorts with the capabilities have done that. I know whenever I went to a Airbnb recently, they had all kinds of automated messages going out. So the technology is definitely there that gives people reminders. Another thing I recommend is the automatic curtains that just come down to do that. It is an expense, but it can be part of the business model, in my opinion. And the other thing, to Councilman Veach's point, is protect yourself and have in your contract agreement that they're responsible for any fines that are levied by the town for ordinance violations.
So this is something that the rental management companies decide for themselves to put into the contracts, or is this something that the town requires, that these vacation properties?
These property managers or owners are putting it in to protect themselves from what the renters do. It's between those two parties. It really doesn't have anything to do with the town. It's my understanding, anyway.
Yeah, I've seen ordinances for other things, not for sea turtle stuff, where they make exceptions for homesteaded properties. I don't know if that's a valid legally or not, but I have definitely seen homesteaded properties being accepted or given less stringent requirements. One that comes to mind was whenever I was researching the landscape ordinance, Miami had less stringent requirements for homesteaded properties in terms of replacements. Instead of 3-to-1 or whatever it was a 1-to-1 replacement for trees. I don't know if that's still legally valid with everything that's going on, but for whatever that's worth.
So where does that leave us?
I think staff is looking for the Marine Resource Task Force to make a recommendation to Town Council on the 15% light transmittance requirement for new construction and replacement windows on the shoreward and shore perpendicular side of buildings along the beach.
Why was that not brought to the committee to begin with?
Why was what not brought to the committee?
The 15% versus the 45?
You have reviewed the ordinance every time that it's been brought to before council. Murph has reviewed it.
Right, we adopted the model ordinance from the
Oh, it was in the.
Florida, but there was a change from 45 to 15, is what's occurred.
So
Also,
town staff wants,
but there's also some removals. The town, like, street lighting was removed out of the model ordinance.
So we were kind of getting at the and or of whatever. Instead of mandating that they have these specific windows, how about we just change it to using these tools and have the list of acceptable tools, or really it's whatever blocks the light. Like, you must be in compliance in some way by using these tools, whether it's an automated system or a combination of automated system and blackout lights, to have every night be the 15% or less or whatever.
Well, it would be less, I mean,
I agree with you. I think 15% is pretty dark.
Right. But what
You
I'm
see a
saying,
car window that's 25 or 20, you can't see in, and
Right.
I think that's way over tinted at, I think it's 20 or 25.
well, I really,
again, this is FWC's recommendation.
Is it 15 or is it 45?
it's the recommendation is 15, and essentially the DEP, who's responsible for the model ordinance, is held it at 45.
but I definitely get what they're saying when it comes to, like, during the daytime, they still want to enjoy Florida. as
Of
Florida.
course, yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes to the nighttime, just as long as they have the tools to make it that, and then we hold them accountable when they're not,
That's the
That's the
key,
key.
right
Key
there.
word,
Absolutely.
accountable.
There's gotta be repercussions if you, if-
Enforcement,
so I think maybe have a set time. Here's your warning. And instead of snail mail, putting it on the doorstep, putting it in the mailbox that day.
But here's the
do-
problem, when you deal with weekly rentals,
you-
by the time you get to the people, they have checked out, and now you have a whole new
Well, I understand,
visitor.
but what I'm saying is then it comes on to the owner of the property, putting it on them also to, okay, we're not making you do these windows, but then we need you to step up to holding your tenants accountable. So if we hold the owner accountable, knowing that they're gonna get fined or whatever for having not the right requirements, then maybe it'll put it on them to go to Turtle Time to get handouts for the rental units, to get the window clings, to get the proper things in place where their tenants know how important it is to comply to this. Or then yes, then the owner will get fined, but then to get their money back, they would have to find that tenant who was there on the day of the problem, or night of the problem.
so. I haven't,
I would also like to point out that for town staff, just because someone sees light and makes a complaint doesn't mean that complaint is valid or held accountable or that it has to be a town staff person who actually visually sees that.
is that true, Chad?
That's my understanding of code enforcement. The code enforcement officer needs to witness it.
And I just want to make a comment on the 15% light, because if you use the example of seeing a car go by with tinted windows, the actual perspective you should use is being inside the car with tinted windows. Because being outside and looking into a dark car, it's going to look dark. But being inside in a bright sunny day, it's quite a bit different. 15%, if you're into photography, anybody, that's like 2.5 f-stops. That's the difference in light as you would perceive it.
So I'm of the opinion that some advice we could give the town council is that whether it be 15 or 45, if it in fact is reduced back to 45, then there needs to be enforcement. I mean, that's the whole point here. How is the town going to enforce the ordinance? And the fact is, there's been no enforcement. So at 45, without enforcement, everything's gonna be the same. And I think the move to 15% is this, again, white LED lights are, this proliferation of white LED lights that are much stronger than the old incandescents, travel so much farther that's why interior lighting, I think, is worse than exterior lighting now. I think if anything, the beach has done a good job with their exterior lighting. Case in point is Island Winds. I mean, the exterior lighting is excellent, but it's the interior lighting that seems to be the problem. So if we do recommend that they decide if they want to loosen it to 45, then they have to enforce the darn ordinance. Because otherwise, the point is moot.
And to enforce it,
Because that's
the
the end
actual
game.
town staff has to visually see it.
They need personnel. How many
Well,
people
then
are doing
One person, 1 day a week, right?
one person, 1 day a week? Is that what I heard?
To cover 7 miles of the island.
I cover segments of the island.
So you don't cover the whole island once a week, you cover segments of the island, so.
All right, I make a recommendation that the town hires more people to enforce their ordinance.
That can be part of a motion.
Yeah, that was my motion.
You said it was a recommendation.
Oh, my motion is the township hire more personnel to enforce the lighting ordinance.
Just a question. Could there be a way for people to be deputized to
tried that.
We tried
No, that hasn't worked.
We've discussed
But
that. We've got a
before,
bunch of
before we second it, is there a way to just change the schedule of the already beach patrol employees to have some of them working later or earlier? That way, instead of getting a whole new, gotta get more funding and all that for that, okay, we already have a beach patrol team,
They're off at 7
Any,
PM.
but any
but
given,
that's what I'm saying. Why not change that?
every given night, any given night, there's violations everywhere.
Right, so why
Would-
not have an overnight staff and change it to, instead of being off at 7, have first, second, third shifts?
As a person managing people, it's really hard to get them to extend their hours at night.
So it'd just be easier to hire someone else for that
Yeah.
specific task?
If you took a job to work until 5 PM and somebody said, now you're working till midnight, would you be a happy employee?
No, but I would,
I'm very happy,
Huh?
very happy.
But
Want to do it 5 days a week?
Technically, if the light's on, what's the time limit? It's not sunset, it's actually 9 PM, is that correct?
No, the ordinance is sunset to sunrise.
It is sunset, so
And
most
the
that,
ordinance also calls out weekly.
okay, so most that are gonna have a light on an hour or two after sunset, those are, that's, typically aren't gonna have them on all night. Or I should say maybe 2 or 3 hours after sunset will technically be on
Yeah.
longer.
Again, I appreciate Dr. Fossum's motion, and I think that's still on the table. What we're
Sure.
looking for is a recommendation, the item is a recommendation on the 15% requirement. There's several options there. You can keep it as it is and still require 15%. You could require something in between 15 to 45%. You could have a 5-year moratorium, which was suggested by some of the condo associations, or a combination thereof.
And I just want to kind of point out, with the motion that's on the table, that I don't think it's within the mandate of the committee to dictate to staff how they enforce things.
The recommendation is for town council to recommend to
It's
Roger.
not even within the mandate of town council. We can recommend to the town manager, and we do policy as far as enacting ordinances and resolutions. We can't tell them, we shouldn't tell them to go through and say, I don't want you to enforce certain parts of certain ordinances, because it's our job to make them enforceable and make them what we want them to be.
No, but we can advise town council to recommend that the town manager start enforcing.
Yes.
Exactly.
That is where the problem is, and we need to change that. But I do need to use the restroom. May I be excused for just a minute?
Of course.
Thank you.
So for the motion that's procedurally, it's either it gets a second and goes on, or it fails for lack of a second.
So how does it need to be reworded?
Well, I think that's fine. We can have a series of motions, so it doesn't have to be one long, flowery
But you
motion.
should,
so-
if either he can restate the motion, or it can fail for a lack of a second, and then you can start over again.
I'd second the motion.
I don't think Bill
We
wanted.
wait for,
Well, you understand, okay,
the motion was to enlist more personnel to help enforcement of the sea turtle lighting ordinance.
And to build on that, I would make a motion that the town.
One motion at a
Oh,
time.
sorry, I thought we were building.
Oh,
on that, sorry. I was
they
trying
have
add
to-
in the town
It's
manager.
impossible to write motions here, because we're all over the place, so that's why these small bits is gonna work a lot better.
Sorry.
So shall we wait for Jennifer? Okay.
But Bill, were you saying we had to word it differently?
well, no, you can recommend whatever you want, but if it's if it's outside the mandate, like you can't say, you can't dictate Chad to do something. It's not really part of your
Correct.
mandate.
Right, we just advised town council, we get
So-
that.
Do
If
we-
you want to say, town council, you advise us that we come up with more funding for more enforcement? We're talking about enforcement now generally.
But you were
We don't
saying. to
necessarily
get-
have to tell them the means of it, that's your job. That's the town council's job and the town manager's job, of how they're gonna fund it, certainly.
But you were saying to get the town manager to be the one who's
You can recommend I'll withdraw kind of the recommendation, because you can say whatever you want, and we'll deal with it in our.
And you'll interpret it the way you will. That seems to be the way it works anyway, to be honest. Here she comes. So Jennifer, we have a second to Dr. Fossum's motion that was enlisting additional personnel to help in enforcement of the sea turtle lighting ordinance. There's a second for that. Any more discussion? As one motion. Discussion? Objections? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. I have a motion. I have a motion. I have a motion that we advise the town council to, there's a couple steps here, let me write down here. To put a moratorium on the current sea turtle ordinance for 15% for 1 year period, and 1 year period, and 1 year periods after that, in order to allow technology potentially to catch up, and allow 45% with the caveat that they enforce the lighting ordinance and they write citations for those that are not compliant with the sea turtle lighting ordinance.
I would second that.
Discussion? Any objections?
I have a question.
Yep.
So, I've heard that it's more expensive or harder to find the 15%, but then I've also heard that no, it's the same price and it's available. I just wanted to ask Chad what he has looked into and what he has found out.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely haven't gotten as many quotes as I'd like. I've been busy. One that, and not every, these guys are also busy, and giving a quote to somebody who's not gonna buy isn't a priority. But I did get, there's this one quote here where, again, what I ask is they give me a standard slider and a standard window that is typical of condos on Fort Myers Beach, and give me a comparison of 45% light transmittance and 15% light transmittance, comparing the cost and the time. So in this particular quote, you have a double slider, 72 by 80 inches, and it was actually $100+ more expensive for the 45% versus the 15%. And the window was, again, slightly cheaper for the 15% by, what, $9. So, the cost is comparable, and I did have to send another email asking about the time, and the time was about the same, 45% versus 15%.
Yeah, I was looking for that communication also with Long Beach?
Oh, the PowerPoint?
Longboat Key, yeah. Dang, I'd have to call up on my phone here, but basically, their staff had done a study, and what they found is that for the manufacture of these, it costs no difference to put 15% or 40% tint into a manufactured piece of glass. So do I have quotes to comment on? No, but they had done the research, and I had an 8-page or 12-pager that kind of went into their whole evaluation of it, and I don't know what the heck I did with it. So, but there is, we understand supply chain issues probably affect different things, and different manufacturers have different complexities and issues. just to answer your question. But the motion stands.
And I'll just comment that in my research, I called one glass place, and they said that they were a PG&T dealer, I think, and all the windows were out like 6 months, but there wasn't much of a difference between the 15 and the 45% glass. And I've also talked to a contractor who said that PG&T is far out, but the Eastern Glass, which makes a similar window, has them both more available.
Right, I think, I mean, again, it's in my only opinion, is that the real issue is visibility. That the pricing is very debatable, availability is debatable. Benefits certainly are thermal, energy cost savings, but in my opinion, it's the visibility.
I agree, but we also need to, when you have people questioning, it's definitely something that we should discuss.
Sure, or making statements?
Right.
Correct. Okay, so there's a motion on the table that was seconded. More discussion? Any opposition? Okay, that motion carries. Any other motions on the subject?
Okay.
Okay. Here. Next up, beach renourishment update. That's our liaison.
Yep, so I just wanted to give y'all some literature on the, we have a cover letter, the easement, exhibit describing the easement, and describing the design, and then the Fort Myers Beach Dune Management Plan. Town Council had asked for examples of the different vegetative planning recipes, if you will. So that's included in that Managed Beach Zone document. And if you had any feedback, I don't think this is anything that, so the one important thing with the easement document is that it's in there, date certain. The easement would last until, I believe it's June 2024. So the reason for that is it's for the life of the permit plus a possible 5-year extension, which I believe FDEP allows. So we're asking for an easement, and that's for the construction to lay pipe across and to pump sand onto private land as well as seaward of the ECL, which would be state lands. So asking for that in addition to the monitoring, the tilling, and we also have a provision for maintenance grading to maintain a positive drainage so we don't have the pooling, which has recreational benefits as well as benefits to nesting sea turtles, to try and prevent some of that inundation that's happened in years past. And then you say, well, why not just end it after that? Maybe that 5 years, once the monitoring and the tilling, et cetera, requirements for the permit are done. If we have a hurricane and 200 plus feet of beaches have been blown away by hurricanes before, and we need to do emergency trucking in of sand or start up another renourishment project sooner than the 10-year design allows for, should Mother Nature do that to us. We wouldn't want to have to go and collect easements to do that. And then we anticipate, it's a 10-year design, therefore in 10 or so years, we'd like to do another renourishment to protect the upland structures and provide for a recreational beach by doing another renourishment in 10 or so years as allowed by the permit. So that's why there's that long time period rather than.
That was a shortfall from the last renourishment, I think, correct? they limited the time and the length of the permit, which,
I'm not sure what you mean by shortfall. I think one of the issues with the easement document in the past was that U.S. Army Corps required a perpetual easement, so, you know, it never went away, and I think there was some objection to that, and they did get another, you know, maybe a 10-year or something to that effect, and maybe that 10-year ran out and they couldn't renourish. I'm not really certain of the history, but I just wanted to explain why there's that 20-year easement request, and it is date certain. And also emphasize the importance of this managed beach zone, beach dune management plan, sorry. In there you have the managed beach zone, planning guidance and criteria for, to ensure property owners have some say-so in what's going in on their property, and they're able to maintain it. It's not going to be a sprawl out onto the beach, which becomes, something that people can't, necessarily recreate on, et cetera. There's provisions in there to limit dune heights. There's provisions in there for species composition for quote-unquote nuisance plants such as sand spurs and knickerbean and coin vine. There's 3 different prescriptions for plantings. There's a sea oat dune combination that's sea oats, predominantly sea oats, some dune sunflower, panic grass, and railroad vine. Another one is a mixed dune with only a 50% sea oat, and then more sunflower, panic grass, and railroad vine in that combination. And then there is a low, quote-unquote, low dune, which is just panic grass, sunflower, sea oats, and railroad vine. Some people have suggested, can we do the sea grapes? They prefer like a sea grape hedge. It's kind of manicured. My answer to that is yes. I'm not sure if the town, be up to town council's purview if they want to direct council to add that combination, and I would still encourage 3-4 species of grasses in addition to the sea grapes, not just a sea grape hedge. Any questions, comments, concerns?
so this is pretty, after sort of comparing it, it's pretty consistent with what was put together for the renourishment 10 years ago.
Yeah, Keith did a great job in putting that together, and the proof is in the pudding on the north side of the island. People that were vehemently opposed to dune plantings and dunes now embrace them and are even asking for them back after tropical storms have taken them away. It gives you, again, back to that seaward line of vegetation and the definition of beach. You can put it out to just landward of the ECL, and then behind there is, quote unquote, a bit more of a private beach, but it doesn't necessarily meet the definition of beach. Therefore, you have, possibly furniture storage or some more private recreating area, and that sort of thing that it kind of opens up the possibilities in that regard.
Right. For example, putting your water sport equipment behind.
Right, and then, you have a dune that theoretically the sea turtles kind of run into and lay rather than getting caught up in that furniture.
Right, continue to walk all the way. So just to maybe for the sake of the 2 people watching, so essentially the managed beach zone is the ability, is a requirement of the renourishment if you receive renourishment sands, is that correct?
Yeah, correct. TDC is not going to give us money without the 75% property width by 10 feet deep. That the staff did confirm that, and
It is, not 80%, it's 75.
75 by
10 deep, not
10
15.
10 feet deep, correct. That's been confirmed. So we did get that nugget, and so that's a TDC requirement. I mean, it would,
So the one you're suggesting is stricter than that, right? So in the document the town has, it's 80% and 15?
no, town documents 75 and 10 feet deep.
Right. Right, and the big difference here is that most people don't like dunes, you know, that are hesitant to put in a dune, is that you have no control over it. Once that you put it in, it grows, you can't manage it, you can't weed it, you can't do anything to it.
Right, we have several property owners that have come to me kind of pleading, what do I do? They're, you know, either in between some open beaches and just catching the sand from both sides, and how do I manage the size of this? So, you know, the ability to make a more effective dune, putting out a frontal dune instead of like a long perpendicular dune, and managing it, managing the species, managing it in place, and still having that dune feature there for resiliency against storm impacts and habitat for, you know, whatever species we have left in the beach dunes to habitat and live in.
But you can control the size of the beach, the dune,
For the managed beach zones, yes.
correct? And also the height.
And
So if it was to grow too large, you can actually top it all the way back down to I think it's 4 feet.
Yep, there's some criteria in there for that, and is the intention of town staff to submit this document to FDP in their request for additional information to hopefully have it incorporated into the permit.
No, I just think it's fantastic. I mean, it just takes away really most of the objections to having a dune, and the fact that you can't maintain it, and now you can.
Yeah, the intention is to, you know, reduce the liability, the regulatory liability that comes with having a dune, but still have that dune for its benefits.
Right.
So I'm just going to point out a couple things, because some things that Chad and I don't necessarily agree on the renourishment project. And one is that, you know, when they did this 10 years ago, the original plan was to renourish from the northern part of the island to Lanark. And they placed an ECL line to do that. But a lot of the property owners objected, and so they only went to just past the pier.
That's that grill, I think, yeah.
It kind of just, you know, wasn't really very far at all. That was an example of somebody who was within it, Sunset Pier, and they objected to it, so they had a pond there, and then Tropical Storm Debbie came and got rid of the pond. So the current plan is actually calls to renourish a lot of the beach that's accreting, and that it's never been renourished before.
Mm-hmm.
And the ponding issue too is something that I think we don't necessarily agree eye to eye, because in a lot of ways I think it's rewarding people who rake instead of plant. And so when you rake, it compresses the sand down deep, which makes it prohibitive for the turtles, and it loosens it at the top and tends to blow away and erode faster.
Mm-hmm.
So I would argue that ponding and that water compresses the sand more than the raking that has 10 PSI tires. And I've talked to people, and I haven't gotten any disagreement on that.
But do you agree that raking erodes faster than beaches that are not raked?
So that pond extends north and
Speaking
south.
generally.
That pond extends north and south into the vegetated areas. It's a physical feature from wave action that happens on the north side, on the Gulf Road side, and it happens on the south side where the lagoon's at.
And another objection I have is that the extent of the sand they're planning on placing through kind of the mid-island section would actually cover some existing vegetation.
So that's not the practice, is to cover existing vegetation. I'm not sure where.
With the maps they show, it shows it covering some vegetation. It shows that the line where they're going to add sand going right up generally to the vegetation line, where some of it's on one side and some of it's on the other, on the documentation you provided.
I think we can have a discussion with the engineer to address those concerns.
And there's areas, like I said, that are accreting that, and I understand that one of the potential benefits is that you become classified as an engineered beach, which means if there's a storm event, then I think so your chances of getting renourishment is fast-tracked, right? And also some FEMA advantages for the property owner.
I don't necessarily fast track, but it qualifies for FEMA. Should, you know, so what happens is you have a hurricane, and you have the depth of closure, which is the point at which there's not a lot of sand transport. So we have monitoring surveys, annual surveys monitoring the beach all the way out to that depth of closure. So we know what the profile is. We know you can calculate what volume of sand you have in there once you have done those. So after a hurricane, you do the same transects along the RE monuments to determine how much sand did we lose out to the depth of closure, not necessarily on the beach, because sand can go, you know, into the water, but it's still in the system. So they do that calculation, and for whatever volume of sand you've lost out of the system beyond that depth of closure, you can qualify for FEMA funding for replacement of that sand if it's an engineered beach. Not necessarily a fast track,
Okay.
just a
Thank you for the
qualification.
clarification, yeah.
Yeah.
But there is still a lot of the beach that's already pretty wide and accreting that would be,
Where are we talking about?
let's say from Connecticut Street to Mango.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a pretty wide section of beach in there.
Right, so, you know, you have to consider the amount of sand that's been put into the system, that's been transported from, say, the U.S. Army Corps project, from on the south side where the 6,000 block has gotten a lot of sand from the
Carlos dredging?
the big Carlos dredging that's why you got complaints with all those shells that ended up on the 6,000 block, because that material was fairly shelly. So, doesn't necessarily mean it's accreting.
Although the coastal studies that were done when Keith Lackerman was in also stated that the center part of the beach is stable. At the either end of the beach is where you get a lot of changes. And even the area down south where the birding area is 15, 20 years ago, they were wanting an emergency renourishment because there was no beach there at all. So things do change pretty dramatically. But much as I understand, there's been sand put in various places, and it does migrate around. And to that degree, if people who have dune vegetation that preserves the sand, you can argue that they're stealing wind-blown sand from their neighbors. But it's a natural way to preserve a beach, and I think that really, I just feel kind of like that going through and doing this over such a broad swath in something that got objections last time it was tried, I think is just a bit excessive. It's not something I completely support. Now, with these gentlemen's concern, my understanding in talking with Chad is that when they place an ECL line, what an ECL line does is it takes the current wet sand line, mean high tide line, and it surveys it. So it says this is where it is, and then all the land that is added seaward of the ECL is the states, and all accretion from that point. If you don't get sand and you put an ECL, all accretion past the ECL also becomes the states. Where these gentlemen are talking about, they're not talking about putting any sand seaward of the mean high tide line. So there'd be no ECL. But the sand would go essentially on private property for the ponding, saying it's a benefit for the general public.
So, let me interrupt here. So you're saying that at that point, they would not be placing the sand in the water to extend the beach, but they would take the sand and put it upland onto the beach?
In the area they're talking, there's like two sections.
Oh, I know, yeah.
So
And that's in the plan now.
That's in the plan currently.
yeah, so let me just reiterate and tell the story, coming on to Town of Fort Myers Beach staff and seeing the issues that happened season after season there, and then learning that some, maybe not all, but some of the condos didn't want that ponding there. So staff is attempting to solve an issue, which is the ponding, which disallows recreation in that area. You know, I've heard complaints about, you know, cuts and stuff from, you know, it being, you know, basically a bird bath. You know, it's stagnant water, birds are in there. You know, accessibility to the beach, especially, you know, whenever it's, you know, a foot or so deep, you know, elders getting out there, and then when the beach does either naturally or anthropogenically release itself, there being a, you know, dangerous, you know, outfall that occurs for a day. So that's the problem that staff is trying to solve. If that problem does not want to be solved, and those property owners don't, you know, they want the pond, they enjoy seeing the birds that do enjoy that pond area, so be it. But that's the intention.
Now, I know you've heard a lot from Island Winds. Have you heard from the other condos and hotels?
My understanding is that people that disagree with you tend to be louder than the people that agree with you. But I'm sure, you know, once we have the easements and we put, you know, and they don't want to sign, that's their prerogative, and I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
Yeah,
This
I
is
mean,
just a, you know,
for novice, you choose to sign that easement or not, correct?
Correct, yeah.
That sort of participation form. If you don't,
Nothing's happening if you don't sign that easement.
then it literally skips your property?
Well,
Sort of like they did at Sunset Grill, where, you know, they had re-nursed all the way and then it went way in.
right, but at some stage, there's a threshold where that segment no longer becomes viable. So if that, you know, 6,000 block doesn't, you know, as a community doesn't want that to happen, then that will very much be in their purview for that not to happen. It's just, again, I'm just permitting an option. You know, people have the right to change their mind, and sometimes people's minds change over time, and that option will be available over the life of the permit.
The permit is 10 years or 15?
It's 15 years, and I believe with a 5-year extension is my understanding.
So if the property or the block turns it down and we have a hurricane and they lose all their beach, including the ponding, they would then be.
Not necessarily, because that design is not to place sand, waterwood. There's no design to put sand, waterwood of the mean high water. That's not the intention there. That's not what we're designing. I intentionally did not even want to put an ECL there because it's an extra process and it's more work. I'm trying to make this as efficient as possible, and the area doesn't necessarily need sand because of erosion. This is just a specific solution for a specific problem in that section of beach.
And with this section of the beach, would it be considered a managed beach dune system there? Or is that only for?
Yeah, they're getting sand, so they would need to, the properties that signed on would need to have a vegetative planting to satisfy Lee County's comp plan.
And for perspective, that is 10 feet wide out of 700-800 feet of beach.
1.25% of that area.
And any vegetation that would grow outside of that, landward, they would be able to
They can maintain it in place.
maintain it and make sure that it's not.
They could manage it in a
Just as it's been done up north. and
10
It's been
foot,
policy for town.
25% wide in perpetuity, and not allow it to grow, as well as not to grow up. You can cut that down to 4 feet.
Who does the planting?
The town.
The town will provide that
Yep, that's written
part
in
of
the
the
ordinance. Yep.
ordinance? Okay.
But what does tend to happen, if you've got a big area of raked sand and you put some plants, then the dunes can grow high.
Which is allowed to be managed by the managed beach zone document.
That's my understanding, yeah.
Should it be accepted by the FDEP?
Maybe we convince some of those landowners to put a small dune in.
I will say, working in insurance, that a community in New Jersey had been offered a grant to build up some sand dunes in a community, and they said no. They didn't want it for various reasons, one being they didn't want to take the view away, and 6 months later, Hurricane Sandy came, and they ended up having no beach and begged for
Yeah,
dunes to be.
I have heard of some multifamily telling me the reason why they have dunes there is because their insurance rates went down. So it is a thing.
Okay, any more discussion on renourishment? Thank you for the update.
Let me just add that we are planning to do some workshops, both to educate and further discuss the project with the community, as well as to get these easements signed. Hopefully, we can get a notary there. Hopefully do one fairly soon in the next couple of months, and then one kind of early in the people season next year, and then in the prime people season in 2023, early 2023, to hopefully get all the easements signed that we need to get signed.
Chad, did you ever find out about, not necessarily on-land beach renourishment, but in water beach renourishment when we're moving sand around, the impact on the invertebrates and ectoderms and everything?
Yeah, so what the in-town's consulting engineer advised was that it was a thing in the past to require studies for benthic organisms, what the effect of the renourishment is. And they basically stopped that requirement because they realized that, yes, it did, wipe it off right after the project, but it quickly came back.
With our diminishing water quality, do you personally think it'll start coming back like it used to when we start doing these more often?
So, we're placing sand. It's not, it's tough to say.
Is it something maybe as a group we could discuss, maybe
I
re-implementing
think
that?
there's bigger fish to fry with regards to issues with what's contributing to poor water quality in Southwest Florida.
Well, every little critter helps out there, and if these guys aren't bouncing back, I think it maybe should be something we should start to re-implement, where we're looking into how quickly they're coming back after these things are happening. If I'm alone in that, then I'll drop it, but I just think those animals contribute to the water health, and if we're wiping them out and they're not coming back as quickly, that's an issue.
I'm not aware of any science behind that.
Okay. If I'm alone in that, then I will drop it.
I don't think you're alone. I just would like to look into it a little bit further
Mhm.
for myself.
Mhm.
But you're not alone.
Okay, never mind, I'm done.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Shall we? Landscape tree ordinance.
I just want to say, it's just the tree ordinance, it's not the landscape. There's two separate ordinances, we just got the tree one.
Correct.
So with that, let me just build upon that. I know we had talked about possibly adding adding single-family residences to Chapter 10 that had a lot of language that we liked with regards to minimum number of trees, native requirements, or maintaining, removing and maintaining exotic species on properties with development orders. But once you get into the development order, and you quickly read that single-family residences are specifically exempted very early in that ordinance, and it just seems counterproductive to try and add single families somewhere in there when that's not the intent of the development orders in the LDC. So that's why I stayed away from it. It wasn't anything more than that. So please don't read into it. What I did try to accomplish with the amending the tree ordinance edits was to remove the 3 for free tree removals for any single-family home, and to require replacements for trees that are being removed, and if those replacements are not possible due to the development and the size of the lot, to require mitigation payment into the tree fund based on a appraisal method that's in Florida statute already. And then the last one was to remove exotics. If you're taking out native trees, also take out the exotics while you're doing that vegetation removal.
The only comment, that's a long list of trees that you have on there, and I did notice coconut palms on that list of protected, but it's not. It's on the list of invasive for the University of Florida list.
So it's a Category 2 invasive. I would argue that it has cultural significance to this island and perhaps to the entire state of Florida, and that may be the reason why it's on that list.
My point was, has anybody gone through the list and checked it with the invasive list and make sure there's none other on the list?
I'm not aware of any others on the list.
No, I know there's one tree on here, and I couldn't tell you which one it was, but I think there's only one that's been found in the state of Florida. But back to the coconut palm, the University of Florida has identified the coconut palm as being invasive in southern Florida and says there's a guideline that you can't plant it next to a canal or moving or open body of water. And so I can forward that to you tomorrow. It's a real short little half-page thing from the University of Florida, the IFAS people, on invasive plants, specifically on the coconut palm. And then I had a question of what was planted, what palms were planted today at Bayside. But that's a future question. And then the recommendation that we had made previously from Murph was that this long list of trees would be made into an appendix so that it didn't like split up the ordinance by separating out. I mean, it can stay there, but it would just be easier. It got moved somewhere else, because by the time people flip through all those pages, it's a long jump to get to the unlawful injury of trees.
So you recommend that we just make that again into appendix, correct?
An appendix, well, that was our recommendation previously. And then definitions were not put in that we had recommended. And I kept thinking, I don't think that people realized the little subcommittee that I had, Don Davids, who's a master gardener volunteer for Lake County, is not just a man who enjoys working with plants. He actually was a commercial businessman developer, and he had developed properties in multiple cities in several different states. So he was very used to reading ordinances and realized how specific they needed to be so that you didn't have people coming back and questioning what was going on or finding loopholes during construction. And my other subcommittee member, Anita Palmer, was a recognized teacher in the state of Florida, not just an Estero Island Garden member who also likes plants. And her contribution was truly to make sure that when you picked up the city ordinance, you could read through it and the general layman could understand what was expected. So I still think the definition should go in and be added. Chad did put in some additional other definitions that were good. But I would still like the ones we had recommended to be included.
So where this stands now is we've separated out the land, the vegetation and the tree ordinance. They still will stand alone?
Well, they always were separate,
Correct, but
and they could still be separate. I mean, some, we reviewed city ordinances from Venice down to Marco. On the southwest coast of Florida, some of those communities have them merged into one. But that's a whole lot of rewriting.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's almost better just to leave it as two and just add in some other things. The list also of prohibited trees. It's just a little line section somewhere. While I'm looking for it.
On H, parent 1,
And I know that it's melaleuca and Australian pine without looking at it, but to add in lead trees and carrot wood and some of the others, and then cite the list of,
so you're switching to chapter 10.
no, I'm looking at your tree ordinance draft. It's
There-
just, I should have marked,
I don't believe there's any mention of any exotics in the actual tree protection ordinance.
okay, I'm going to find it.
I saw the reference to it.
Yes, it's just it's not, here it is, it's on the second page, if you're looking on it, under section 14-374. It's actually under definitions of invasive exotic tree, and then it lists some, but it just lists a couple. It lists the melaleuca, Brazilian pepper, and Australian pine, and I would like to have something added in about checking with the Florida.
So which section is this?
It's under, actually, definitions.
So
It's
which,
one of your definitions on invasive exotic tree, and that was
can
from
you read me the section number, please?
14-374. And what would be really nice
A,
is to actually, you could use the wording from out of the Marco one, that says this is just an example of some, and then it should be, determined to be, if it's a plant that is on the exotic plant species that's determined to be noxious, invasive, or cause environmental degradation to native habitats, or to be detrimental to human health, safety, or the public welfare by the Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council. And then it cites that you could find that current list on their website. And that probably needs to be added if we're gonna list just a couple trees.
Yeah, so I referenced category 1 on the FLE PPC list, and I can change that definition. I wasn't aware of that definition actually being referenced anywhere else in this particular ordinance. In terms of invasive exotic tree. So they have the definition, but I don't think it's actually referenced in the code itself, but we can switch that definition of invasive exotic tree to category 1, invasive exotics, as amended.
I really like the tree fund. It's probably my favorite part.
Mine too.
Okay.
Any other?
did you see anything else in there, Rose? That was-
Well, no, some of the other things, I mean, the majority of our recommendations was on the landscaping ordinance.
Right,
So, it's really the definitions are a prime concern, just to make it super user-friendly for anyone who doesn't know what some things are. They might hear them being discussed.
do you have any objections to that, Chad, adding more definitions? it seemed to me to help clarify things, wouldn't it? And it would also help
You know,
in
so
ordinances where you can manipulate.
we can go through the definitions. I just, you know, in terms of enforcement and adding definitions, I mean, if you're removing or damaging a protected tree to the point where it's effectively removed, you know, that definition's there. To add things like hat rack and lion tailing and defining those, you know, I'm just not sure if we have the staffing resources to go and look out for, you know, trees that are hat racked or lion tailed and going after that kind of thing. I think, you know, I was just trying to keep it simple, to be honest.
Yeah, now some of the terms I've gone through and circled where they were listed in the document and weren't added, the ones you mentioned about the girdling and hat racking, I understand, although since utility companies can cut down portions of trees and then they become hat racked, you know, if someone's out there as an owner of a piece of property and all of a sudden the utility company comes through and starts chopping out the center of their tree and says, oh, we're hat racking it, it would just be for them to understand. That is not one of the terms in here. But,
And again, I mean, the homeowners can maintain those trees themselves and shape them themselves. The utility's providing that as a free service, but they're only gonna do what is interfering with their utilities. So if the homeowner wants to do a better job at maintaining the tree, that's their purview.
Well, Rose is our expert, so I want to make sure she's satisfied.
well, I was just gonna say, yeah, the only other real key definition that's not in here would be the historic trees, the tree historic one, where if there is some tree, and it's interesting, because I met someone at the Marine Resource pop-up, that had just purchased property here, and they were asking me about, they had this huge banyan tree in their lot, and I said to contact Chad, but it was like they didn't know if it had historic value or significance, and it's like, you know, there are gonna be trees possibly in our community that meet that definition. And so
in nominating that tree as historic means
that it gets to stay.
even if they want to build their house there.
But it has to be by a professional forester, horticulturist, or other professional plants. I mean, it has to be a notable historic interest.
Right, but I think if we start saying things such as, you know, you have an historic tree, and what does that mean? And we're gonna say you don't get that beneficial use, which is accepted in the code anyway.
I don't know, other communities have that, so I don't know.
Right, I'm trying to understand the practicality of it. And what does that mean once it's historic? How do you see that playing out?
That you don't get to build there.
That's a pretty
That's
tough,
online, sort
that's a
of.
pretty tough ask in this town, and you're speaking to someone who's had those conversations. Again, I heard what you said, and I don't necessarily disagree with you from a philosophical standpoint, but from a practical standpoint, someone spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a piece of land and hundreds of thousands of dollars more on a house, and then telling them they can't do that because there's a tree there, and it's historically been there, you know.
Well, then, pardon me, I don't mean to interrupt, but everyone is accountable and responsible to know what property they're buying, and so I would just say that.
So then you're opening yourself up to devaluing somebody's property because you've now said that tree is historical, and if you could sell that vacant piece of lot, you know, now somebody buying it is purchasing a liability and you've diminished their lot value?
It's like Margaritaville now has the cigar bar as part of their property, and they can't tear it down because it's historic.
Well, that historic comes down from the state, and it's been in effect for some time.
I thought they chose not to tear it down
I'm not sure.
to meet the setback rules. I mean, it's built right on the sidewalk. That was my guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there's a historic
Speculate, yeah.
historic and cultural register with the state that, you know, and that could certainly be enforced and is enforced by the state. But for us to enact a new ordinance that designates trees as historic may be tough.
does Fort Myers have that? Like at the Edison, those banyan trees, are those considered historic?
It's private property, so
Plus they can turn
whatever
on,
they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I think the entire Edison property is considered probably historic.
We good? Okay.
So if I can ask for a motion with regards to these edits and bringing them to council on your recommendation, or not bringing them to council on your recommendation?
Sure, I'll make that motion. I make a motion that our staff liaison brings this language for the tree ordinance to town council for evaluation.
I'll second that.
That's the second we were looking for. Any discussion? Any objections? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, Chad. Yep. I think Rick Stan will be happy to see it. What else we got here?
Dark skies.
Dark skies, all right. So, I had anticipated, and I do have it, but I'll probably just send it to the PIO, the images and whatnot, to support the educational stuff we had said we'd send her months ago.
Okay.
So we'll send that, but there are a couple items here actually on dark skies again, or maybe the prevention of pursuing dark skies. And believe it or not, they're part of the municipal projects that are going on. So one of the big questions is this: as a advisory board, we've made recommendations to the town council, and some of those are about the compliance of those projects. So a couple questions. So one is, I think since you're involved, is what is the minimal foot candles allowed at the property line? Huh?
I believe it's
0.5.
zero. If you
However-
have answers to the questions, please just.
No. I just thought I'd ask. So the question is currently under Bayside Park, under the specifically the white light, half a year, they've got 5 times that luminance level shown on the photometrics. Now, I think we discussed this before. They've unlike the Musco, plan that was done for Bay Oaks. Did you look at that plan?
I'm sure I've looked at a lot of plans.
They have a property line, and it shows you exactly what the luminance levels are. And so, do we have to assume on the photometrics that the outside box is the property line? Because right now, it's like I said, it's 5 times the luminance levels at the property line. If we make assumptions that the photometric plan that they provided us is the property line. But even at 5 times, even if it was a foot off of it, can they reduce that 5 times by the time it hits the property line? And that's hard and fast. I mean, that is hard and fast in the municipal lighting ordinance. Because also in Times Square, it's as high as 14 times. So 7-foot candles right at the curb. And I believe the curb would have to be the property line. Is that? So my question is would you agree that that's out of compliance based on our municipal lighting ordinance? Because at some point I have to find out who can make that determination. How do I approach it? Do I go to the permit office? How do we do this? Is the question. As well as the minimum luminance levels for the ambers is below the 0.8, stated right on the plan. So can they tweak it for 200s? Probably, but, so that's the question. Will there be a plan that actually complies with it? Or it could be my ignorance to how permits are.
Yeah, so as you know, I'm not a lighting engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest that you submit your questions in an email, and I'll be happy to forward them to
Yeah, I don't know
someone who
who-
can answer them.
Yeah, I don't know who is the head of the permit department.
Daphne Saunders.
Daphne is, okay. Okay, good.
I have a question in regards to permits. Are those made of,
Oh.
you may not know this, but I'm just curious if anyone knows, are all permits made available to the public?
I believe so, but I also believe we're off topic. We're talking about dark skies.
I just had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So also then, in regards to lighting, so Times Square, has there been a approved land development order for lighting for Times Square?
Again, if you can submit your questions in writing, and I'll get them answered for you.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I think that's it. Next subject, the Good Citizen Award, AKA the Murphy. Do we have any nominations? We have one in the bank. Do you have any? Wendy? By the way, it's nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Any nominations?
I do have one from April 2nd it was a group from FGCU that were there with, on behalf of Keep Lee County Beautiful. These amazing young women out there cleaning our beaches. Something struck me when they came to the pop-up and had some comments about our beaches, and they said that, you know, they have often gone out and picked up garbage before, but they were really surprised at how much more garbage there was in plastics on our beach. They were actually very surprised and disappointed, and so I think that they deserve the Murphy Award because they're out there. They're not throwing or making the garbage or contributing to our plastic issues, but they're actually out there doing something about it. So the only problem is I have been searching for their phone number and names that I have somewhere. I just haven't found it, but an amazing group of FGCU students. That's my Murphy, my recommendation for a Murphy Award.
So would you just identify them as a group of FGCU students?
I could but I will also look for their names and their contact information as well.
Okay. Any other nominations? We've got one in the bank, don't we, still? I think the Osprey, but I think that was on the front page. Was that the story?
Yeah, I mean, it's been covered on different news channels, and I haven't had a chance to look at the article in the Observer, but
Okay.
the fire department, I was contacted by the head of TIOF, which is the International Osprey Foundation, that they had fledgling that had fallen into the water in Captiva and needed to be and that was being rehabbed at Crow and needed to be re-nested around the same 24 hours. The nest I had recommended that to the person who's in charge of my area of Fort Myers Beach Monitoring, that I recommended the pink shell nest, one because it seemed to be like the fledglings were about the same age, maybe a week or two apart. Unfortunately, when I went to monitor that nest, and many people, including Pink Shell, and I think some visitors, had noticed that there was plastic bag in the nest. And that particular day happened to be very windy, and what happens is the ospreys will, basically hover over the fledglings to make sure that they don't fall out. And I couldn't tell exactly, but I had thought it might be plastic underneath her. Well, that morning, the very next morning when the wind died down, I believe Crow and Pink Shell had been contacted, with their concerns that one of the fledglings had died, had passed away. I'm gonna get,
I'm confused. Is that this the one that we have in the Murphy we have in the bank, or is that?
you had mentioned that, I hadn't mentioned that before.
No, remember
because
you-
this happened within.
Well, no, you had the
weeks
lady
ago.
that came with the forklift or something, right? Or the,
No,
The one at the bank was the guy with the three-tiered rainbow that was in the last edition.
no,
And then the one that you were just looking at, Rob, in the paper, which,
this just happened.
That was my.
well, I just asked if that was in fact the bank one.
No, I remember you said one, there was somebody who had got a cherry picker in and helped. I remember you.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Okay, so,
Anyhow,
okay,
in
so we have
this-
one nomination here.
Yeah, and this story is different from the one that's in the bank.
Okay, so we have one nomination for the FGCU? group?
I would like to continue real quick. So
Oh.
the fire department, so to re-nest the one from Captiva, we needed, and to remove the deceased one from the pink shell mounted nest, I had to call and ask the fire department, the Fort Myers Beach Fire Department, for their dump, I'm sorry, not dump truck, but their lift,
Ladder truck.
ladder truck. And they were more than gracious, and they all came out and did that. So they should be, they should be, what's the word I'm looking for? Nominated or recognized, thank you, as well. Because
So you have two.
I have to.
Okay, so, let's do this the easy way. How many are in favor of the FGCU group?
That one's good.
Aye, okay. Did you have a vote? Well, it doesn't matter.
The girls.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, unanimous vote for the FGCU crowd.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having one, by the way. I have been very good about it. Members' items and reports. Actually, prior to that, as part of the Murphy, next month, we've got, I think Wendy, you're on call for your article.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so you're aware of that. Good.
and I had one other thing about the Murph Award. I don't have a nomination, but if we're gonna keep using this time of 2 o'clock as a start time, that needs to be changed in the article.
Ah, okay.
Because it
And the
keeps saying
template?
that
Okay.
Murphy is at 3 PM on second one.
Okay, duly noted, duly noted. All right. Good catch. Okay, good. So you're on board, and members' items and reports, we will start also with,
Okay,
Wendy.
with all the talk about renourishing the dunes, I was, kind of got outside the box thinking about natural reefs that are outside our island. They help with all kinds of weather, the movement of the water, the movement of the sand, the base. And I'm wondering if that should be something that we look at, the artificial reefs that we already have, and if there's, and I think this is a state thing, actually. But are there possibilities that maybe we could get, do a survey?
They do a survey of the
Do
hard
they?
bottom resources.
When they do the artificial reefs, you mean?
Yeah,
They do, yeah. They have to make sure that they're on limestone, so they just don't sink down into the
Well, no,
sand.
well, for the renourishment, to make sure hard bottom surfaces aren't impacted during the renourishment. Is that what you're speaking to?
well, it's all tied together, I know, somehow, and is having additional artificial reefs outside in the Gulf gonna be beneficial as far as reducing the need for beach renourishment on the island?
They're miles away. I'm not sure if they.
Yeah, the
one affects
closest
the
one is
other.
May Reef, and that's probably 3 miles away. You've got GH Reef, it's about 7.
And they're not
Dock
close
lines.
enough to make any impact on
No, and they're typically piles, so it's not really a reef system.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's
yeah.
just a pile,
It'd be
yeah.
like a jetty or something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Affect it more.
Mm-hmm.
And you just mentioned the jetties. We used to have, didn't we have jetties on the island that were at some point to help protect erosion from events, weather events?
Do you want to talk at that, Jed? You know,
I'm not.
Beach armoring?
I'm not as knowledgeable about the history and what's been buried since. If anybody else has any knowledge.
there are some buried jetties. I think there's one mid-island, maybe at the 6,000 block area, I think, that goes out, or even further down by the Wyndham. There's an older
Some by
one.
the north end. But then I couldn't even tell at that point if they were jetties or if they were supposed to be like private boat docks. Or is that like the pier replaced?
Those are the piers, yeah, these are jetties. These are just, I mean, they're submerged, they're gone for the most part. I don't even know if you can see them on your bottom unit. Yeah, so,
Just some thoughts I had.
yeah, thanks, Wendy. How about you, Rob?
Real quick, if you guys aren't talking at the next, I don't know, you guys kind of seem like you want, waiting to leave. Oh, okay, that's coming up then. He gave me a look, I was like,
Oh, okay.
I was like,
Like, one of these looks like, come on, you're
yeah.
killing me.
Sorry,
Okay.
I was trying, yeah. Yes, I have two things I wanted to touch on. One, did we want to discuss at all them trying to get more jet ski permits on the island and the impact that would have naturally? I know right now the Margarita plan and Tom is trying to get his own jet ski company in, going out of Margaritaville, and he's doing all kinds of stuff to make that happen, and I just think that that would be an awful thing, is because if we allow him to, then other people are gonna be like, why not us? If we don't allow him to, then it stays the way it is, which, but I just think that's opening a can of worms if he gets another permit for even more jet skis, especially in that area. I
I
didn't know if we
think
wanted to talk
there
about
are
it at all.
watercraft companies that would be more than happy to service his area.
Right. Or he
And
could-
move.
Or he could buy
Other
their license.
I think it's ongoing. I mean, right now, I think they're looking at different options, but I think one thing that'll prevent the proliferation of licenses is just the safety issues.
Yeah.
So there's, I know there's environmental issues that go along with it, and certainly, issues with people that are trying to fish for tarpon out there when they're, running through your lines, but I think, I mean, that's in my opinion, I think there's the safety issues will prevent proliferation.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, the town requests that we advise them, we will.
Okay, that sounds good enough. Then the other thing is, I have a friend in the Calusa Sierra Club, and this is,
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify. So we can also request to the town council that we would like to have some weigh-in on decisions. So I just wanted to clarify that,
We
because you
yeah, we-
said we'll wait for them, but
No, we
sometimes
would-
we need to,
We do that all the time, so
Yeah.
I'm very well aware of that. Yeah,
no, I know.
am,
I
yeah,
just-
thank you, Jen, I appreciate that.
yeah.
Anyway, so I have a friend in the Calusa Sierra Club. They're getting ready to get a permit, but it's going to be called Hands Across the Sand, Fort Myers Beach. And I just thought you guys would like to know about it, and Jen, you'd like to know about it. They plan on having multiple local organizations with tables and displays offering educational and environmental material for people to interact with, maybe one of our pop-ups with them. There will be a beach cleanup, various speakers from local organizations, a chain of linked hands across the beach at the waterline. Points to focus will be local water quality in particular, local fertilizer ordinances. We wish to make people aware of ordinances, the effects of fertilizer on local waters, and create a public push to sign requirements at a local fertilizer retailers. So organizations so far invited are the Calusa Sierra Club, the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, Calusa Waterkeepers, Lee County Natural Resource Department, Reset Center, and Fort Myers Beach Marine Task Force. So this is our invitation to be part of this. It's on May 21st. It'll go from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and it's going to be at the Time Center right there by the pier, is what they're hoping to get the permit for and everything. So the questions they have, are there any council members that would be interested in speaking on water quality impacts in the local economy and tourism? Can we have tables with educational materials set up in Times Square? And these are, I guess, some for Patty, which I got from Chad. And the last one is, do we need to apply for a permit, which is a yes. But I have their website and information. They have a website specifically for this event. If anybody wants it, it's just handsacrossthesand.org.
And May, what was the date?
21st.
I thought you said 22nd.
I'm sorry if I did. I said May 21st, 2022. Yeah, that might have been.
Can you send that to Chad? And Chad, do you mind giving that to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You can have this paper too if you want.
That'd be probably easier.
Okay.
Okay, anything else, Rob?
Nope, that is all. Thank you.
No report from me this month?
I have no additional.
I do. I wanted to ask Murph if they had any thoughts on aligning with the Lee County, Charlotte County Shorebird Alliance, which is the biggest citizen science program in the world. Any thoughts? Or something that we can discuss at our next meeting?
You said shorebirds?
Mm-hmm. It's the Lee Charlotte County's Shorebird Alliance. It's one of the biggest citizen science programs in the world.
Sure.
The second is the pop-up has celebrated its 1-year anniversary on April 2nd. We've had over 70 pop-ups, over 1,000 volunteer hours given. We've connected many nonprofits with visitors and the community. With all of our efforts, a couple of the community nonprofit organizations have been kind enough to give us donations for the pop-up to continue our outreach and our education. And I'd like to extend a thank you to Fort Myers Beach Community Foundation. And then I had a talk with the Kiwanis, Fort Myers Beach Kiwanis Club, who generously gave us a $250 check to go towards the Marine Resource Task Force outreach, educational outreach pop-up. And I just got a phone call, and they are also, they've extended not just this 250, but are giving us an additional 2,000. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Good job, Jen.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, thank those organizations and everyone's support. I think it's been an amazing year, and when I see those little kids' faces light up when they, open or learn about the snowy plover, or they open up the Kids Coastal Activity book to learn about the aquatic wildlife, or saving sea turtles, or all about alligators, or Florida Caribbean activities information. And a lot of kids these days, they are all on the computers. They don't have the things that they're learning from while they're in the environment. And I really appreciate Ding Darling's support in supplying all this information in the past year. Unfortunately, I've been told by one of the rangers, they will no longer be able to provide this incredible information. So I'm gonna ask the committee to really help me figure out some other ways of getting this amazing information and educational information. So,
Good.
thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Rose, anything?
I'm gonna save my Google Map activity for another time, for the invasive plant project. But I do have the question that I saw or heard palms were planted at Bayside Park just recently, and I'm wondering if they're just going forward with all the plans from Times Square to Bayside Park without any of the recommendations being followed on not putting in coconut palms.
Yes, the answer is yes. It would appear they're moving forward. Yep. That's it.
I do have one more thing, I apologize. Regards to the MRF base, the budget, some of the things we had discussed were maybe having some flashlights that are turtle wildlife friendly. I did speak with Turtle Time Inc. and got the recommendation that if these are to be handed out, they are to be handed out with information, and they are to be handed out with the understanding that we communicate this information, not to be given to hotels or other, condominiums, but maybe for people walking the beach that have this information, understand it, can communicate it properly, and for the town staff to have something that if they feel like they can adequately explain the information. I'll just quickly say on one side of the card, if you come across a sick or injured sea turtle, do not approach it. Please call FWC at the number or Turtle Time. Sea turtle season runs May 1st through October 31st. It is illegal to approach or disturb a sea turtle. Please stay at least 50 feet away from any turtle on the beach. No white lights or flash photography on beach during nesting season. Please turn off / shield interior and exterior white lights visible from the beach. Close curtains. Thank you for your help protecting our wildlife. So I've ordered 100 of these. The total cost for each one, including this, is about $3.10 a piece.
Are we asking them to return those flashlights?
No.
Something I would,
So that's something, I mean, I would think that we would bring up as an item, agenda item, to actually move forward with.
Well, but the last meeting, you had basically said.
I had said there would be a big item, and we weren't sure whether it was gonna be
Well,
bags or bottles or flashlights, whether they're rechargeable ones to put into hotels or, I mean, I don't think it was to bring ideas,
okay,
I think.
I thought the budget was approved.
right.
Yeah, the budget is approved, but I don't think the item was, correct?
You have to get the minutes.
I mean, at some stage, you gotta release.
Well, again, if everybody's good with it, I mean.
Well, I
it's-
mean, we have a certain amount of money, and 3,000 were to go towards the pamphlets and 4,000 towards base, right? Base, whether it's bags, or whether it's,
I'd have to look at what the
So-
amounts were, but.
I thought I was able to, make that.
yeah, I remember it
call.
saying we,
You were gonna,
Yeah, that you trust, right, and so I did.
that's kind of how.
And now, I only ordered 100 of them. And if that's a concern, or,
no, so, the reason I bring it up is that, there was, we decided what, we would spend in the different areas, correct? And, one was graphics, and you were gonna look into graphics and let us know what you find, or find a graphic designer, what they charge, and then also get an idea of what that piece is even gonna look like for approval by the advisory board. And my understanding was that the same thing would go for whatever our large item was.
okay.
So, but that's, I mean, 300 of them, fine, I guess. We can worry about that later.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think they're,
ideally, I think if they return it to town hall rather than taking it back up to Indiana.
Well, I even thought, when we hand those out, as
Can we-
part of that, say, when you're done with this, find someone else with a light and give it to them instead.
can we add this as an agenda item for the next meeting?
Sure.
I think would be the best way to talk about it.
Should I cancel the order?
I think it's a great
Because
idea.
we could still use them as a trial either way.
That's why I went with 100.
3 by 100, right, $300?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd say, I mean, in my opinion, I mean, let's vote on it. All those in favor of Jen filling her order?
Aye.
All against? Okay, motion carries unanimously.
And I do have information on the graphic designer that that I had gone to on the pamphlets, and the graphic design.
Well, can we save that also for the next meeting? Or,
I've already taken the information to them. They've given us an email, and I'll forward it to Chad. It's basically to approve $240 to approve that we accept those charges for them to do the graphic design.
okay. Good.
I think we left out approval of the, did we do the minutes? Approval
Yes,
of-
we did. Yeah, I
Okay,
need a copy of
approved.
the sign. Yep.
You do?
So,
Excellent.
so are we done? Members' items and reports for now? Perfect. Public comment, Mr. Repetti, would you like to make one more comment? You got blood circulating in your legs again?
I'm not sure whether it was my knees from sitting there that long or my ears from listening to what I heard caused the most pain today. But one thing I did find out, Mr. Johnson, is that you're really interested in taking care of us old folks who live down on the beach, the gray-haired guys who live on the beach, by restricting our activities, even though they're not restricting your activities because you don't live down on the beach. But thank you very much for that. Even more, by the way, even more than the state of Florida restricts our activities. Mr. Fossum, I'd like to thank you for raising the question about what happens if I paint my doors black and my windows black. I can still open them. I was expecting Mr. Johnson, who protects the owners of the beach, to jump up and say, we're going to put locks on those windows and doors once you paint them black, and only Chad is going to have the key for them. Ms. Russ, thank you very much for suggesting that Chad get some help, because right now, all he does is annoy the people at the far south end of the beach. He doesn't go up to where the big hotels are and the big money guys are. He doesn't even go to the Wyndham. Okay, but he needs help, so maybe a couple of the people from Department of Public Works who fix our potholes in our side streets can help you out, Chad. Thank you for the only common sense I heard here this afternoon. Mr. Howell, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for having us.
John R. King, 8402 Estero Boulevard, Fort Myers Beach. This is my first meeting, so it's probably not fair, but I'm just going to have to share that I've been on a lot of committees and I've facilitated a lot of committees. I'm not sure if you've ever been trained, but I would suggest it for this committee, or maybe at least some facilitation to help you stay on task and get through your processes. I'm going to give some bullet points of what I've heard today. I heard it was FWC that did the lighting ordinance. I don't think so. From what I've seen, it's been FDEP the whole time. That's what this whole ordinance for Fort Myers Beach is pretty much based on. Also, Fort Myers Beach is one of the few municipalities in the state that applied this ordinance to alterations or window replacements. I'm not sure why you chose to go that extra mile. Number two, nobody is looking for a get out of jail free card. As you noted, the ordinance still speaks to window coverings. The issue is the cost. Now I've heard, and I will dispute what I've heard today, because the 15% window tinted glass is up to 4 to 8 times higher than the 45%. Longboat Key, which was mentioned earlier, had the second highest turtle disorientations in the state. They decided against the 15% glass ordinance because of the higher costs. In addition, the 15% is a much more difficult product to secure and it's an existing limited supply. Number three, I heard something about whether the Section 3205, paragraph E, discussed whether it was some or and or. It pertains to all glass windows, walls, railings, and doors on the seaward and shore perpendicular sides. Number four, FDEP does address roadways in this. And I'm sorry the councilman left earlier, but to me, it's not stealing if Mother Nature provides it. And he was talking about sand being blown around. Thanks.
Thank you.
Set agenda for the next meeting, shall we?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A budget, we'll put that out there. Make sure you can share that information, Jen, that you got from the work you've been doing. Herbicide spraying, is that, do we expect to hear back by then, you think, Chad? Should we put it on there?
Well, and/or?
Sure, at least a follow-up, yeah, we'll
I'd
put
like-
that,
I'm gonna
so
reach out
B's
to some
good.
people and get some information also on that, so I'd like to talk about it.
Beach renourishment update, landscape ordinance, any additions from our members?
I'd like to do the vegetation thing, just to show people the Google map. It's
Okay.
now- That mapping thing has been done.
Mm-hmm. Well, vegetation, yeah, management is, or that ordinance actually is still forthcoming too. Correct, so, let me find that. Okay,
We need to do dark sky.
sure, let's add that. Budget, FWC, vegetation management, dark skies. We forgetting anything? Any additions? Chaz, is there anything that, there's always something that comes up in between now and the next meeting.
I'm sure it will.
Okay. And, so do I, entertain a motion here to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Okay, 5:12, motion adjourn, meeting adjourned.
Ms. Jen,
Yes.
I put all of the contact information on the document.
Clerk was adamant you do need to sign this.
Yeah, you brought me one, what, so I just need, I think
You know what your calendar
Yeah.
is gonna be doing on May.
How about yours?
Probably.
Good.
And you know what else I was thinking, well, just recently, I was like, you know, maybe since it's now like summer, almost, with the, well, it feels like summer, with the tourist season ending.
Chad, sorry. Chad,
No, and I didn't want to ask the question.
No, it's a public comment.
I've never made sense in my life. What's he talking about?
No, that's fine.
I thought he was leaving.
They're exercise.
Thought I wore long pants and support stockings. My legs would be like this.